The coffee cup shattered against the marble floor. Elena stood frozen, staring at the man who'd just walked through the door, the billionaire whose company had destroyed her family. But that wasn't what made her hands shake. It was his eyes. The same green eyes that had promised her forever 16 years ago, before he vanished without a word. Landon Pierce stopped mid-step, his face draining of color. "Elena?" The name fell from his lips like a confession. "Stay with me until the end to see if love can survive betrayal, billion-dollar lies, and a stolen past. Drop a like and comment your city. I want to see how far this story travels." The morning shift at Riverside Cafe started the way it always did, with chaos masquerading as routine. Elena Brooks moved through the narrow aisles between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this too long. Her sneakers squeaked against the black and white checkered floor, the sound lost beneath the din of espresso machines hissing, dishes clattering, and the low rumble of conversation from the Tuesday morning crowd. Manhattan professionals in their sharp suits and impatient expressions, checking their phones between bites of overpriced avocado toast. She didn't mind the noise. The noise meant she didn't have to think. "2 cappuccinos, 1 black coffee, and a croissant for table 6, called Maria from behind the counter, her Brooklyn accent cutting through the ambient chaos. "And table 9 needs a refill. Guy's been nursing the same cup for 20 minutes. Elena nodded, already moving. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had started neat at 6 a.m., but was now coming loose at the edges. She tucked a strand behind her ear as she grabbed the coffee pot, the heat from the glass warming her perpetually cold hands. Table 9 sat by the window, where the morning light filtered through the river fog and cast everything in shades of gray and gold. The man sitting there hadn't looked up once since he'd arrived. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena made in 3 months, and he held himself with the kind of stillness that suggested he was either very patient or very good at pretending. Elena approached with her professional smile firmly in place, the one that didn't reach her eyes but satisfied most customers. "Refill?" He glanced up, and for a moment something strange happened. The cafe didn't go quiet. The espresso machine didn't stop hissing. The world didn't slow down or freeze or do any of the dramatic things that happened in movies. But Elena felt it anyway. A sudden, inexplicable shift, like the moment before thunder when the air goes heavy and strange. His eyes were green. Not hazel, not brown green, but actually green. Clear and bright even in the muted light. She knew those eyes. The thought arrived fully formed and completely irrational, and she pushed it away immediately because that was impossible. She didn't know this man. She'd never seen him before in her life. "Please," he said, his voice low and even. "Thank you." Professional, polite, nothing remarkable about it. Elena poured the coffee, watching the dark liquid fill his cup almost to the brim. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. 6 years of waitressing had trained the shake out of them, even when her mind was somewhere else entirely. "Can I get you anything else?" "No, this is perfect." She nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Excuse me." Elena looked back. The man was reaching into his jacket pocket, pulling out a wallet that was slim and expensive looking, the kind that held credit cards made of metal. He drew out several bills and set them on the table beside his untouched coffee. "I haven't paid yet," Elena said automatically. "I can bring you the check." "Keep it." She glanced down. $300 in crisp 20s and 50s fanned out next to the cup. Her professional smile faltered. "Sir, the coffee is $4. "I know. This is way too much." "Consider it a tip." Elena's fingers tightened around the handle of the coffee pot. Tips were good. Tips meant she could make rent without dipping into her tuition savings again. But $300 for a single cup of coffee wasn't a tip. It was something else. Pity, maybe. Or guilt. Or some rich person's idea of charity, the kind that made them feel good about themselves while making her feel small. "I can't accept this," she said quietly. The man studied her for a moment, and there it was again, that strange sense of familiarity, like a word on the tip of her tongue that she couldn't quite remember. "Why not?" "Because I didn't earn it." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "You got up at 5 in the morning to serve coffee to people who don't say thank you. I'd say you earned it." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but he was already standing, already buttoning his jacket with smooth, practiced movements. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small white card, placing it on top of the money. "In case you change your mind," he said. Then he was gone, weaving through the morning crowd and disappearing through the glass door before Elena could find her voice. She stood there, coffee pot still in hand, staring at the empty chair. Maria appeared at her elbow. "Holy shit, did that guy just leave you $300? "I think so." "Well, you gonna keep it?" Elena set the coffee pot down carefully and picked up the card. It was thick, expensive cardstock embossed with simple black lettering. Landon Pierce, founder and CEO, Pierce Capital Management. Below that, a phone number and an email address. "Elena?" Maria's voice had an edge to it now, the tone she used when she thought Elena was overthinking something. "You're keeping it, right? Because if you don't, I will." "Yeah," Elena said distantly. "Yeah, I'm keeping it." But she wasn't looking at the money anymore. She was looking at the name. Landon Pierce. It meant nothing to her. Should it? The rest of the shift blurred together in the usual way. Orders taken, food delivered, tables cleared. Elena moved through it all on autopilot, her mind circling back again and again to the man by the window. Those eyes. By the time her shift ended at 2 p.m., she'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. Rich people did weird things all the time. Maybe he'd just closed a big deal and was feeling generous. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he tipped everyone like that. She changed out of her work clothes in the tiny staff bathroom, pulling on jeans and an old sweater that had been gray once but was now closer to no color. Her backpack was right where she'd left it, shoved into her locker beside Maria's makeup bag and a half-eaten sandwich from yesterday. "You heading to class?" Maria asked as Elena slung the bag over her shoulder. "Library first. Got an exam Thursday." "You're gonna burn out, you know that?" Elena smiled, a real one this time. "Not yet." "Yeah, well, when you do, make sure you fall somewhere soft." Outside, the air was crisp and cold, carrying the smell of the river and exhaust fumes and roasted nuts from the vendor on the corner. Elena walked the 12 blocks to the subway, with her hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets, the business card a small foreign weight against her fingertips. She should throw it away. Whatever that was back there, it was done now. Some random encounter with a random rich guy who'd probably already forgotten her face. But when she got on the train, she pulled the card out and looked at it again. Landon Pierce. The name still didn't ring any bells. She typed it into her phone as the subway rattled and swayed beneath the city. The search results loaded, and Elena's stomach dropped. There were pictures, dozens of them, professional headshots and candid photos from charity galas and business conferences. Landon Pierce in a tuxedo, shaking hands with people whose names Elena vaguely recognized from the news. Landon Pierce on the cover of Forbes, looking serious and competent beneath a headline about the new generation of Wall Street power players. But it wasn't any of those photos that made her breath catch. It was the older one, buried halfway down the page. A scan of a newspaper article from 16 years ago, the image grainy and faded. Local boy receives full scholarship to prestigious academy. The photo showed a teenager, maybe 15 or 16, standing outside a school building with an awkward smile and eyes that were too big for his face. Green eyes. Elena's hand started shaking. No, that was impossible. She clicked the image, enlarging it until the pixels blurred, and stared at the boy in the photograph. The same sharp jawline, the same dark hair, the same expression, caught somewhere between proud and uncertain, like he wasn't sure he deserved to be photographed at all. Landon Pierce, like 16 of Millfield, receives congratulations after being awarded a full scholarship to Ashford Academy, read the caption. Millfield. The word hit her like a punch to the chest. Her hands weren't just shaking now. Her whole body was. Because she knew that name. She knew that boy. She'd grown up with him. The library was supposed to be her sanctuary, the one place in the city where the noise stopped, where she could spread her textbooks across a table and lose herself in accounting principles and macroeconomic theory and pretend for a few hours that she was building towards something better. But today, she couldn't focus. Elena sat at her usual spot by the window, staring at her laptop screen without seeing it. The business card lay on the table beside her notebook, the name staring up at her like an accusation. Landon Pierce. Except that wasn't the name she remembered. Back then, he'd just been Landon. Landon with the hand-me-down clothes and the bruises he wouldn't talk about. Landon who'd sat next to her in Mrs. Harper's fifth-grade class and shared his lunch when Elena forgot hers. Landon who'd taught her how to skip stones on the creek behind the old Miller property and promised, with all the seriousness a 10-year-old could muster, that they'd be friends forever. And then one day, he was gone. No warning, no goodbye. Just an empty desk and rumors that his family had moved, or maybe he'd been sent away, or maybe something worse. Elena had written him letters, dozens of them, in the beginning. Careful, childish printing on lined notebook paper, sealed in envelopes she addressed to Landon somewhere. She'd given them to her father to mail, trusting that somehow they'd find their way. They never did. Eventually, she stopped writing. Life moved on the way it always did, dragging her along whether she was ready or not. Middle school, high school, her father's diagnosis, the medical bills that swallowed everything, the night shifts and the day shifts, and the slow, grinding realization that college was supposed to be 4 years but would probably take her 8. She hadn't thought about Landon in years, and now here he was. Not just alive, not just successful, but a billionaire. Someone important. Someone who left $300 tips and had his face on magazine covers. Someone who'd walked into her cafe this morning and looked at her like she was a stranger. Had he recognized her? The question twisted in her gut. She wanted to say no. Of course not. It had been 16 years. They were kids. People change. But those eyes. The way he'd looked at her just for a second before his professional mask slid back into place. He'd known. Elena was sure of it. She didn't go home that night. Instead, she found herself on the subway again, riding it north out of Manhattan and into the Bronx, then switching to the Metro North that would take her even farther, away from the city lights and the cramped apartment she shared with 2 roommates who were never home at the same time, away from the cafe and the library and the carefully constructed life she'd built from nothing, toward Millfield. It was a stupid decision. She had class in the morning, had a shift tomorrow afternoon, had an exam she wasn't prepared for. But her body moved on instinct, carrying her toward a place she hadn't seen in over a decade. The train was mostly empty this late. Elena pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and watched the landscape blur past, suburbs giving way to smaller towns, then fields and forests that looked black in the darkness. By the time she got off at the Millfield station, it was nearly midnight. The town hadn't changed much. Main Street still had the same brick storefronts, though half of them were dark now. Windows papered over with for lease signs. The diner where her father used to take her for pancakes on Sunday mornings was gone, replaced by a vape shop. But the old church was still there, and so was the elementary school, its playground equipment rusted but standing. Elena walked through the empty streets with her hands in her pockets, her breath fogging in the cold air. She didn't know what she was looking for. Answers, maybe, or proof that she hadn't imagined the whole thing. The house where she'd grown up was on the east side of town, a small 2-story with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Except it wasn't hers anymore. Hadn't been for 8 years, not since her father died and the medical debt swallowed everything and the bank took the house and the land behind it. Elena stopped at the end of the driveway, staring up at the dark windows. Someone else lived there now. A family, probably. Kids who played in the same yard where she'd once built forts and caught fireflies and believed the world was a good place. She should go. This was trespassing, or close enough. But her feet wouldn't move. Behind the house, beyond the overgrown backyard, lay the 20 acres of woods and fields that had belonged to her family for 3 generations. Her grandfather had farmed it. Her father had tried, before the illness made it impossible. Now it was owned by some corporation, fenced off and marked with no trespassing signs. Elena closed her eyes and saw it the way it used to be. Saw herself at 10 years old, running through the tall grass with Landon close behind, both of them laughing about something that didn't matter. Saw the creek where they'd spent entire summers, the old oak tree where they'd carved their initials with a pocket knife Landon had stolen from his dad. Saw the boy who'd promised to be her friend forever, and then left without saying goodbye. She made it back to the city just before dawn. Her roommates were asleep, or pretending to be, when she let herself into the apartment. Elena dropped her backpack by the door and collapsed onto her bed, fully clothed, exhaustion pulling at her like a riptide. But she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. Not the polished businessman in the expensive suit, but the boy from her childhood. The one who'd looked at her with those green eyes and made her believe she wasn't alone. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Elena reached for it, squinting at the screen. An email. Sent at 5:47 a.m. from Landon Pierce. Her heart stopped. She sat up slowly, her hands unsteady as she opened the message. What? From landon.pierce@piercecapital.com. 2. Her email address. How did he get her email address? Subject. Tomorrow. Elena, I don't know if you remember me. I'm not sure I have the right to assume you do, but I think we need to talk. Tomorrow morning, same cafe, same table, 7 a.m. If you don't come, I'll understand, but I hope you will. Elena read it 3 times. Then she set the phone down, pulled the blanket over her head, and tried very hard not to think about what tomorrow morning would bring. She didn't sleep. By 6 a.m., she'd given up trying. She showered, changed into clean clothes, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection like it might have answers. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that needed a trim, lips pressed into a thin line that had become her default expression somewhere along the way. When had that happened? When had she stopped being the girl who laughed in the tall grass and started being the woman who couldn't afford to smile unless she was getting paid for it? Elena turned away from the mirror. Mom. The cafe was quiet when she arrived at 6:45. The morning rush hadn't started yet, and Maria was still setting up, humming tunelessly as she restocked the pastry case. You're early, Maria said without looking up. And you're not on the schedule. I know. So what are you doing here? Elena didn't answer. She slid into the booth by the window, table 9, and folded her hands on the surface in front of her. Maria finally looked up, her expression shifting from curious to concerned. You okay? Yeah. You're a terrible liar. I know that too. At precisely 7 a.m., the door chimed. Landon Pierce walked in. He looked different in the morning light. Less polished, maybe. His suit was still expensive, but his tie was slightly loosened and there were shadows under his eyes that matched Elena's own. He saw her immediately. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Landon crossed the cafe in 4 long strides and stopped in front of her table. You came, he said quietly. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. So did you. Can I sit? She nodded. He slid into the seat across from her, and for a long moment they just looked at each other. Up close, the years fell away. Elena could see the boy he'd been in the lines of his face, in the way he held himself, in the slight hesitation before he spoke. It's really you, Landon said finally. It's really me. I thought... He stopped, shook his head. I looked for you after I left. I tried to find you. Elena's throat tightened. I wrote you letters. I never got them. I know, I figured that out eventually. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Why did you leave? The question came out sharper than Elena intended, but she didn't take it back. Landon's jaw tightened. I didn't have a choice. My parents, it was complicated. Complicated? Yeah. You couldn't have told me? I was 15, Elena. I didn't even know it was happening until the day before we left. And by the time I tried to reach you, he broke off, looking away. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. His eyes snapped back to hers, and for the first time she saw something raw in them, something that looked like pain. I'm sorry, Landon said quietly. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I didn't find a way to tell you. I'm sorry for all of it. Elena wanted to be angry. She'd earned the right to be angry, hadn't she? 16 years of silence, of wondering, of growing up without the one person who'd made her feel less alone. But sitting across from him now, looking into those green eyes that hadn't changed at all, she found she didn't have the energy for anger. Why now? She asked instead. Why come back? Why find me? Landon was quiet for a long moment. I didn't plan it, he admitted. I was in the city for business, saw this place on my way to a meeting and thought, I don't know what I thought. that I'd grab coffee, maybe clear my head before a conference call, and then I walked in and you were there, and you recognized me. Instantly. He said it like a confession. You look different, but your eyes, they're exactly the same. Elena's chest tightened. So what happens now? She asked. Landon leaned back in his seat, and something in his expression shifted. The vulnerability she'd glimpsed a moment ago disappeared behind a mask of careful control. I want to make things right, he said. If I can. Make what right? Everything, starting with... He hesitated, and Elena saw his hands tighten on the edge of the table. Starting with your father's land. The air went out of the room. Elena stared at him. What? The property behind your old house, the 20 acres. I looked it up after I left yesterday. It's... Landon's voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. It's owned by my company now. The words didn't make sense. Elena's brain tried to process them, tried to fit them into some kind of logical framework, but they just sat there, wrong and impossible. Your company, she repeated slowly. Pierce Capital Management. We acquired it 8 years ago as part of a larger portfolio. 8 years ago. The same year her father died. The same year the bank seized everything and Elena's entire world collapsed into medical bills and probate court and the slow, grinding realization that she was alone. You bought my family's land. Not personally. I didn't even know about it until yesterday. But yes, my company owns it. Elena stood up. The movement was automatic, her body acting before her mind could catch up. She needed to leave. Needed to get out of this cafe, away from this conversation, away from him. Elena, don't. She was already moving toward the door, her vision blurring at the edges. Elena, wait, please. Landon's hand caught her wrist, not hard, not restraining, just enough to stop her. She yanked her arm back like she'd been burned. Don't touch me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... You didn't mean to buy my family's land? You didn't mean to show up here and tear open everything I've spent 8 years trying to bury? Her voice was shaking now, all the careful control she'd built up crumbling. Or you didn't mean to leave 16 years ago without saying goodbye? Landon flinched. All of it. I didn't mean any of it. Well, you did it anyway. She turned and walked out, leaving him standing there in the middle of the cafe. Maria looked up from the counter, eyes wide, but Elena didn't stop. She made it 2 blocks before the tears came. She didn't go back to the cafe that day, or the next. Maria covered her shifts without asking questions, bless her, and Elena spent the time holed up in the library, pretending to study while her mind ran in circles. The land. Her father's land. The place where she'd spent every summer of her childhood, where her grandfather had planted apple trees and her grandmother had kept bees. The place that was supposed to be hers someday, before the medical bills swallowed it whole, owned by Landon's company. It felt like a betrayal, even though logically Elena knew it wasn't. He'd said he didn't know. And why would he? Billionaires didn't personally oversee every property acquisition. They had people for that, but logic didn't make it hurt less. On the 3rd day, Elena's phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but the number was local and she was expecting a call from her advisor about next semester's class schedule, so she picked up. Hello? Ms. Brooks? The voice was professional, clipped. This is Jennifer Kwan from Pierce Capital Management. Mr. Pierce asked me to reach out to you regarding the Millfield property. Elena's stomach dropped. I don't want to talk about this. I understand, but if you could just give me 5 minutes. No. She hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Elena stared at it, her jaw clenched. It rang 4 more times before she finally turned it off. On the 4th day, Landon showed up at her apartment. Elena opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, looking profoundly out of place in his tailored suit among the peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights. How did you find me? She demanded. I asked Maria. Maria gave you my address? She said if I hurt you again, she'd kill me herself. Landon's expression was carefully neutral. I believe her. Elena should slam the door in his face, should tell him to leave and never come back. Instead, she heard herself say, Why are you here? Because you won't answer my calls. That's called a hint. Elena, please, just give me 5 minutes. After that, if you want me gone, I'll go. She shouldn't. This was a bad idea on every possible level. But he was looking at her with those green eyes, and she was so tired of running. Fine, Elena said. 5 minutes. She stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small and cramped, with mismatched furniture and walls that were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing. Landon didn't comment on any of it. He just stood in the middle of her living room, looking uncomfortable and human in a way that made Elena's chest ache. Say what you came to say, she told him. Landon took a breath. I've been looking into the land acquisition, the one from 8 years ago. And it doesn't add up. The purchase price was way below market value, even accounting for the state of the property. And the timing, it went through right after your father passed away. Elena's hands curled into fists. I know when it happened. I think there was pressure involved. Maybe coercion. The company that brokered the deal, they had a reputation for aggressive tactics. We acquired them 2 years later, which is how we ended up with the Millfield portfolio, but I'm starting to think the original transaction wasn't clean. What are you saying? I'm saying someone took advantage of your family when you were vulnerable, and I want to make it right. Elena laughed, a bitter sound that scraped her throat. Make it right? How exactly do you plan to do that? Give me the land back? Write me a check and call it even? If that's what you want. What I want? Her voice rose. What I want is for my father to be alive. What I want is to not have spent the last 8 years working myself to death just to afford community college. What I want is for you to not have shown up and reminded me of everything I lost. Landon was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he said finally. I can't fix any of that, but I can at least investigate what happened and make sure the people responsible are held accountable. Why? Because you feel guilty. Yes. The honesty of it caught her off guard. I left you once, Landon said quietly. I don't get to decide if you forgive me for that, but I'm here now and I'm asking for the chance to do something good. Not for me, for you. Elena wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him to take his guilt and his money and his tailored suits and get out of her life. But she'd spent 8 years trying to move forward, trying to build something from the wreckage of her father's death. And she was so tired. Okay, she heard herself say. Landon looked up sharply. Okay? Okay. Investigate. Figure out what happened. But Landon, she met his eyes. This doesn't mean we're friends again. This doesn't mean anything except I want answers. I understand. And if this is some kind of game, it's not. Then prove it. He nodded slowly. I will. The investigation started the next day. Landon brought in forensic accountants and real estate attorneys and spent hours poring over documents that Elena couldn't make sense of even when he tried to explain them. She sat in conference rooms in his office building, sleek glass and chrome, so far removed from her world it felt like another planet, and listened to people in expensive suits talk about things like predatory lending practices and fraudulent valuations. It was overwhelming. It was infuriating. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to emerge. Her father's land hadn't just been undervalued, it had been deliberately misrepresented. The company that brokered the sale had hidden a geological survey showing significant mineral deposits beneath the property, deposits that could be worth millions. They'd known. They'd known the land was valuable, and they'd lied. And Elena's father, desperate and dying, had signed it away for a fraction of what it was worth. I'm going to be sick, Elena said. She was standing in Landon's office, staring at a stack of documents that proved, in cold legal language, that her family had been robbed. Landon was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. Sit down. I can't. Elena, sit. She sank into the leather chair, her head in her hands. They knew, she whispered. They knew my dad was dying and they used it against him. Yes. And your company bought it anyway. We didn't know. I swear to you, we didn't know, but that doesn't make it right. Elena looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. So what happens now? Landon crouched down in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. Now I make it right. We file a lawsuit against the original brokers. We get restitution, and we return the land to you if that's what you want. If there are other options, we could develop it properly with your input. Use the mineral rights to fund something good. A community project, maybe. Something that honors your father's memory. Elena's throat tightened. I need time, she said, to think about this. Take all the time you need. And Landon, she met his eyes. Thank you for doing this. He smiled just a little. Don't thank me yet. We still have to win. The lawsuit took 3 months to file. In that time, Elena and Landon fell into an uneasy rhythm. He'd call her with updates, she'd meet him for coffee, never at the Riverside Cafe, always somewhere neutral, and they'd talk about the case, the land, the memories they shared. They didn't talk about what had happened 16 years ago. Not directly, but it hung between them anyway, a ghost they both pretended not to see. And slowly, carefully, something began to shift. Elena started to see him not as the boy who'd left her, but as the man who was trying, however imperfectly, to make amends. And Landon looked at her like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. It terrified her. Tell me about your daughter, Elena said one afternoon. They were walking along the river, the same path she took to work every morning. The sky was gray, threatening rain, and the wind off the water was cold enough to make her pull her jacket tighter. Landon's expression softened immediately. Sophie, she's 6, smart, stubborn, completely fearless. She sounds like trouble. She is, in the best way. He smiled and it transformed his face. She asked me yesterday if I thought dragons were real. Not in a do they exist way, but in a why don't people believe in them anymore way. Elena laughed. What did you tell her? That some things are real even if you can't see them. That's very diplomatic. I'm a dad. Diplomacy is my superpower. They walked in comfortable silence for a moment. What happened to her mother? Elena asked quietly. If that's not too personal. Landon's smile faded. She died 4 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. So am I. He shoved his hands in his pockets. We weren't together anymore when it happened. The divorce was almost final, but she was still Sophie's mom, and losing her... He broke off, shaking his head. It was hard. Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she just reached out and touched his arm, a brief, tentative gesture of comfort. Landon looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. You'd like Sophie, he said. She reminds me of you, actually. The way you used to be, I mean. Brave and curious and absolutely convinced the world was full of magic. I'm not that person anymore. Maybe not, but she's still in there somewhere. Elena pulled her hand back. You don't know me anymore, Landon. Not really. Then let me. The words hung in the cold air between them. This is complicated, Elena said finally. I know. And I'm not sure I trust you yet. I know that too. So why are you doing this? Really? Landon stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Because when I saw you in that cafe, it felt like the universe was giving me a second chance. And I've spent 16 years wondering what happened to you, if you were okay, if you hated me. And now I know, and I... He stopped, frustration flickering across his face. I don't want to lose you again. Elena's heart was beating too fast. We were kids, she said. What we had, it was a long time ago. I know. And you're a billionaire with a daughter and a company and a life that's nothing like mine. I know that too. So this, whatever this is, it can't work. Maybe not. Landon's eyes searched hers. But don't you want to find out? And there it was, the question she'd been avoiding since the moment he walked back into her life. Did she want to find out? Yes. The answer came swift and sure, rising up from someplace deep inside her that still remembered what it felt like to be 10 years old and fearless. Yes, she wanted to find out. Okay, Elena said softly. Okay? Okay. Let's find out. Landon smiled, a real smile this time, wide and genuine and so much like the boy she'd known that Elena's chest ached. And for the first time in 8 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this wreckage. The rain started as they walked back toward the city, cold drops that quickly became a downpour. They ran for cover under a bridge, laughing and breathless, and stood there dripping while the storm raged around them. Landon's hair was plastered to his forehead. His expensive suit was soaked through. He looked ridiculous. He looked perfect. "We should probably head back," Elena said, even though she didn't want to move. "Probably," Landon agreed, but neither of them did. They just stood there, close enough to touch, while the rain fell and the river rushed past, and the city hummed overhead, and Elena thought, maybe this is what second chances look like. Messy and uncertain and absolutely terrifying, but real. The storm didn't let up for 2 days. Elena watched it from the window of her apartment, rain streaking down the glass in patterns that looked almost deliberate. The weather matched her mood, turbulent, uncertain, caught between clearing and getting worse. Her phone kept buzzing with updates from Landon's legal team. Documents to review, depositions scheduled, questions about her father's medical records that made her stomach turn. She'd signed so many authorization forms, her signature had started to look like a stranger's handwriting. On the third morning, the rain finally stopped. Elena was halfway through her shift at the cafe when Landon walked in. Not at 7 a.m. this time, but at noon, when the lunch rush was starting to thin and Elena's feet were already aching. He didn't sit at table 9. Instead, he approached the counter where she was wiping down the espresso machine. "Can we talk?" he asked. Maria, who'd been pretending not to eavesdrop from the pastry case, suddenly became very interested in rearranging the croissants. "I'm working," Elena said. "I know, but this is important." Something in his voice made her look up. His expression was tight, controlled in a way that immediately put her on edge. "What happened?" "Not here, please." Elena glanced at Maria, who waved her off without being asked. "Go. I've got this." "You sure?" "Yes, now get out of here before I change my mind." Elena untied her apron and followed Landon outside. His car was parked illegally at the curb, some sleek black thing that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. A driver stood beside it, expressionless. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "Millfield." Her heart stuttered. "Why?" "Because I need to show you something." The drive took 90 minutes. Landon spent most of it on his phone, speaking in clipped sentences to people whose names Elena didn't recognize. She sat in the back seat beside him, watching the city give way to suburbs, then farmland, then the familiar rolling hills of her childhood. She hadn't been back since that night 2 weeks ago, hadn't wanted to face it again. But here she was. They parked on the side of the road near her old house. The current owners had added a swing set in the backyard, Elena noticed. Painted the shutters blue. It looked lived in, loved. It looked nothing like the place she remembered. "This way," Landon said. He led her around the property line, toward the woods that marked the edge of what used to be her family's land. The fence was still there, chain link and rusted, topped with faded no trespassing signs. Landon produced a key from his pocket and unlocked the gate. "You own it," Elena said. "Not a question. For now." They walked in silence through the overgrown path. Elena's boots crunched on dead leaves and broken branches. Everything was wilder than she remembered, nature reclaiming what had been left untended for too long. Then the trees opened up, and Elena stopped dead. The field was gone. In its place was a construction site. Heavy machinery sat dormant in the mud. Excavators, bulldozers, equipment she couldn't name. The ground had been torn up, exposing dark earth and jagged rock. Stakes marked off sections with colored tape. And in the center of it all was a drilling rig. "What is this?" Elena's voice came out hollow. "Mineral extraction," Landon said quietly. "They started 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks? She spun to face him. "You said you didn't know. You said your company just owned the land, that you weren't doing anything with it." "I didn't know, not until yesterday." His jaw was tight. "One of my executives approved this project without running it by me. Said it was a routine development, already cleared through the proper channels." "Who?" "Richard Cordell, VP of Acquisitions." The name meant nothing to Elena. And he lied. This project should never have been approved. Not without a full environmental impact study, not without community notification, and definitely not— Landon's voice hardened. "Not without disclosure about how we acquired the land in the first place." Elena looked back at the drilling rig. at the churned earth and the machines that had ripped apart the field where she used to run barefoot in summer. "How much?" she asked. "What? How much is it worth, the minerals?" Landon was quiet for a long moment. "Conservative estimate? 15 million. Maybe more." The number didn't feel real. It was too big, too abstract, like hearing about a natural disaster in a country she'd never been to. "My father sold this land for $30,000, Elena said. "He was dying, and they told him it was worthless, and he believed them because he didn't have a choice." "I know. Do you?" She turned on him, anger flaring hot and sudden. "Do you actually know what it's like to watch someone you love sell the only thing they have left just to buy a few more months? To sign papers in a hospital room while morphine drips into their veins because they're in too much pain to think straight?" "No, I don't." "Then don't say you know." Landon absorbed the hit without flinching. "You're right. I'm sorry." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of disturbed earth and machine oil. "What are you going to do?" she asked, finally. "Stop it. All of it. The drilling, the extraction. I'm shutting down the entire project effective immediately." "And Cordell?" "He's done. I'm terminating his contract and referring the matter to our legal department." Landon's expression was granite. "If he broke laws, and I think he did, he'll answer for it." Elena wanted to feel satisfaction at that, vindication, maybe, but all she felt was tired. "It won't bring it back," she said quietly. "Stopping the project, firing some executive, it won't undo what happened. I know that too. So why bother?" "Because it's the right thing to do." Landon moved closer, his voice dropping. "And because you deserve better than watching your family's land get stripped for profit by people who stole it in the first place." Something in Elena's chest cracked open. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the polished billionaire or the boy from her memories, but something in between, someone trying, however imperfectly, to be better than the circumstances that had shaped him. "I want to help," she said. Landon blinked. "Help how?" "With whatever comes next. For this land, I mean. You said there were options, development, community projects. I want to be part of that decision." "Elena, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She met his eyes. "This is my family's legacy. If we're going to do something with it, I should have a say." A slow smile spread across Landon's face. "Okay, then let's figure it out together." They stood there in the ruined field, two people bound by a past they couldn't change and a future they hadn't figured out yet. The drilling rig loomed behind them, silent and accusatory. But for the first time since this all started, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, they were moving in the right direction. The meeting happened 4 days later in a conference room that was all glass walls and uncomfortable chairs. Elena sat between Landon and his lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, who'd explained the legal strategy 3 times, and Elena still only understood half of it. Across the table sat Richard Cordell. He was older than Elena expected, maybe 55, with steel-gray hair and the kind of tan that came from golf courses and Caribbean vacations. His suit probably cost more than her car, if she'd had a car. He looked supremely unconcerned. "Let's be clear about something," Patricia said, sliding a folder across the table. "We have documentation proving you knew about the fraudulent acquisition of the Millfield property. Emails, memos, meeting notes. You authorized the drilling project knowing full well the land was obtained through illegal means." Cordell didn't even glance at the folder. "That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. Your interpretation of a fact." He leaned back in his chair. "I approved a project that had already been vetted by our acquisitions team. If there were irregularities in how the land was originally purchased, that happened years before I joined this company." "Except you knew," Landon said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "You knew, and you buried it." "I knew the land had valuable mineral deposits. That's not a crime, Mr. Pierce. That's business. You knew a dying man was coerced into selling his property for a fraction of its worth. I knew the transaction was legally completed. What the previous owner understood or didn't understand isn't my responsibility." Elena's hands curled into fists under the table. Cordell's gaze finally shifted to her. "Miss Brooks, I'm sorry for your loss, truly, but your father signed those papers of his own free will. No one forced him. He was dying, Elena said. Her voice shook, but she didn't care. He was desperate, and the people you worked with lied to him. That's an emotional argument, not a legal one. Then let's make it legal, Patricia interjected. We're prepared to file criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. We have enough evidence to make this very uncomfortable for you. For the first time, something flickered in Cordell's expression. Not fear exactly. More like irritation. What do you want? He asked. Your resignation, Landon said. Effective immediately, and full cooperation with our investigation into the original land acquisition. And if I refuse, then we go public. Every detail, every document. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person Pierce Capital employed. Landon's smile was cold. Your reputation will be finished. Cordell was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table. You're making a mistake, he said finally. That land is worth millions. Walking away from it for some misplaced sense of justice. That's not how business works. Maybe not, Landon agreed, but it's how I work. You'll regret this. I doubt it. Cordell stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You'll have my resignation by end of day, but Pierce, this isn't over. Yes, Landon said quietly. It is. They watched him leave, his footsteps echoing down the hallway outside. Patricia gathered her files. Well, that went better than expected. He's going to cause problems, Landon said. Probably, but we have everything we need to bury him if he does. She looked at Elena. How are you holding up? I don't know, Elena admitted. I thought I'd feel better seeing him squirm, but I just feel empty. Yeah. Patricia's expression softened. That's normal. Justice doesn't always feel the way we expect it to. After she left, Elena and Landon sat in the conference room alone. Thank you, Elena said, for doing this. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have just buried this whole thing, written me a check, made it go away quietly. But you didn't. Landon turned to face her fully. I told you, I want to make this right. I know. I'm starting to believe you actually mean that. I do. They looked at each other across the table, and Elena felt that same pull she'd felt under the bridge in the rain. That dangerous, terrifying sense of possibility. Have dinner with me, Landon said suddenly. Elena blinked. What? Dinner. Tonight. Not about the case or the land or any of this, just dinner. Landon, I know what you're going to say. This is complicated. We're in the middle of a legal battle. It's a bad idea. And you're right, but I'm asking anyway. Elena should say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming at her to say no. What about Sophie? She asked instead. She'll be with her nanny, unless... He paused. Unless you want to meet her. Elena's heart was racing. Isn't it too soon for that? Probably. But she keeps asking why I'm smiling at my phone so much. You smile at your phone? When you text me, yeah. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's pathetic? I know. I was going to say sweet. Landon's expression softened. So is that a yes? She was definitely going to regret this. Yes, Elena said. Dinner, but somewhere normal. No five-star restaurants or places that require reservations 3 months in advance. Deal. They ended up at a tiny Italian place in Brooklyn that Landon swore he'd been going to for years. Elena was skeptical. Billionaires didn't generally frequent restaurants with plastic tablecloths and breadsticks in paper wrappers, but the owner greeted Landon by name and immediately started arguing with him in rapid Italian about whether the lasagna or the carbonara was better. You really do come here, Elena said as they settled into a corner booth. Every Sunday when Sophie's with her grandparents. It reminds me of... He stopped. Of what? Of being broke, in a good way. Landon smiled. I used to come to places like this when I first moved to the city. Before the money, before any of it. When I was just trying to figure out who I was. And did you? Figure it out? Still working on it. The food arrived. Massive portions that Elena knew she'd never finish, and for a while they just ate in comfortable silence. Tell me something, Landon said eventually. Something I don't know about the last 16 years. Elena twirled pasta around her fork. Like what? Anything. What you studied in school, where you traveled, what you wanted to be when you grew up. I didn't travel. Couldn't afford it. Okay. What did you study? Business administration. Boring, I know. Not boring, practical. That's a nice way of saying boring. Elena took a sip of wine. What about you? How does someone go from Millfield to billionaire in 16 years? Luck? Timing? A full scholarship to a school that opened doors I didn't know existed. Landon's expression turned distant. And a lot of very determined running away from where I came from. Your parents, were they really that bad? His jaw tightened. My father drank. My mother pretended everything was fine. When the scholarship came through, they didn't want me to go. Said I was getting above myself, that I'd fail and come crawling back. So I left and never looked back. Do you ever talk to them? No? The finality of it hung between them. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly. Don't be. Some families are better left behind. He looked at her. You were the only good thing about that place. You and the creek and the summers that felt like they'd never end. They did end, though. Yeah, they did. Elena pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. Can I ask you something? Anything. That last summer before you left, did you know that you were leaving? Landon was quiet for a long moment. No, my parents didn't tell me until the night before. We packed one suitcase and left before dawn. I didn't even get to say goodbye to you. I waited, Elena said. At the creek, every day for 2 weeks. I thought maybe you'd come back. I'm sorry. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Elena met his eyes. I know, but Landon, sorry doesn't change what happened. It doesn't give me back those 16 years. I know that too. So where does that leave us? I don't know, he admitted, but I'd like to find out. If you'll let me. There it was again. That question she kept trying to avoid. Elena looked at him, at the boy he'd been and the man he'd become, and made a decision that was probably stupid and definitely reckless. Okay, she said. Let's find out. The smile that spread across Landon's face was worth every risk. They were halfway through dessert when Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Maria. She never calls this late. Answer it, Landon said. Elena stepped outside into the cool night air. Maria, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly, but there's a guy here asking for you, says it's urgent. What guy? Wouldn't give his name, just said he has information about your father's land and you need to hear it tonight. Elena's stomach dropped. I'm not there, I'm in Brooklyn. Want me to tell him to come back tomorrow? No, yes, I don't know. Elena looked back through the window at Landon, who was watching her with concern. Can you keep him there for 20 minutes? I can try. Thanks, I'm on my way. She went back inside and grabbed her jacket. We need to go. Landon was already standing. What happened? Someone's at the cafe. Says he has information about the land. At this hour? Elena, that's... I know. But what if it's important? Landon pulled out his phone. I'll have my driver bring the car around. They made it back to Manhattan in 15 minutes. Landon's driver navigating traffic with the kind of aggressive precision that probably broke several laws. Elena's mind was racing the entire time, running through possibilities. Who would show up at 9 p.m. with information about her father's land? Someone from the original acquisition company? A whistleblower? Or worse, someone trying to intimidate her into backing off the lawsuit. The cafe was closed when they arrived, but the lights were still on. Maria let them in, her expression wary. He's in the back, she said. And Elena, be careful, something about him feels off. The man sitting at table 9 wasn't what Elena expected. He was young, maybe 25, with nervous energy that manifested in constantly shifting feet and hands that wouldn't stay still. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. Miss Brooks? He stood when he saw her. Thank you for coming. I know it's late, but I needed to talk to you. Who are you? Elena asked. My name's David Chen. I used to work for Cordell. Behind her, Elena felt Landon go very still. Used to? She said. I quit this afternoon, after the meeting. David's hands twisted together. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't keep lying. What do you mean, lying? David reached into his backpack and pulled out a laptop. I have copies of everything: emails, documents, recordings, proof that Cordell knew exactly what he was doing with your family's land. We already have proof, Landon said. My legal team. Not like this. David opened the laptop, his fingers shaking. You have evidence of the fraud, but you don't have this. He turned the screen toward them. Elena stared at the email chain, her brain struggling to process what she was reading. It was dated 8 months ago. A conversation between Cordell and someone named Jay Morrison at a company called Apex Development. The subject line read, Millfield Expansion, Phase 2. Phase 2? Elena's voice came out hoarse. Cordell wasn't just planning to extract minerals from your family's land, David said. He was planning to acquire the surrounding properties too. Another 200 acres. He had deals lined up with 3 other families, people who don't know what their land is worth. Elena's vision blurred. He was going to do it again. Not just again, on a much larger scale. He was going to turn the entire area into an industrial mining operation. Landon moved closer to the screen, his expression darkening with every line he read. This was approved? No, he was doing it off books, planned to present it as a done deal once the Millfield extraction was profitable. David's voice dropped. He told me if anyone found out, we'd bury the evidence and blame it on the original acquisition team. Said it was just business. Just business, Elena repeated numbly. I'm sorry. I should have come forward sooner, but I was scared. Cordell made it clear what happens to people who cross him. Why come forward now? Landon asked. Because after today's meeting, I went home and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ms. Brooks and her father and all the other families Cordell was planning to screw over. And I realized, David looked at Elena directly, I realized I don't want to be the kind of person who lets that happen. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. What do you want from me? Nothing. I wanted you to have this. All of it. Use it however you need to. This could get you in serious trouble, Landon said. Corporate espionage, breach of contract. I know, but it's the right thing to do. They stood there in the empty cafe, 3 people bound by the same ugly truth. Finally, Landon spoke. Thank you for bringing this to us. David nodded and closed the laptop. There's one more thing. Cordell has connections, political ones. If you're planning to go after him, you need to be prepared for him to fight back hard. Let him fight, Elena said. Her voice was steady now, the shock giving way to something harder. We have the truth on our side. Truth doesn't always win. Then we'll make it win. David studied her for a moment, then smiled slightly. I believe you will. After he left, Elena sank into the nearest chair. Her legs felt boneless, her mind spinning. This is bigger than I thought, she said. Landon crouched in front of her, taking her hands in his. We can handle it. Patricia will know what to do with this information. It's not just about the lawsuit anymore. It's about stopping him from doing this to anyone else. I know. What if we can't? What if he's too powerful, too connected? Then we fight anyway. Landon's grip tightened. Elena, look at me. She did. We're going to win this, he said, not because it's easy, but because we're not backing down. Cordell thinks he can intimidate people into silence, but he didn't count on you. Or you. Or us. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elena pulled her hands free and stood. She walked to the window, looking out at the empty street. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to be the person who fights back. I've spent so long just surviving, just trying to get through each day. I don't know how to... You do know, Landon said, coming to stand beside her. You've been fighting your whole life. This is just a different kind of battle. What if I lose? Then we lose together. Elena turned to face him. Why are you doing this? Really? It can't just be guilt. Landon was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Do you remember the last day we spent together? He asked. Before I left? At the creek. You told me you were going to change the world someday, that you were going to do something important, something that mattered, and I believed you. His voice went soft. I still do. Elena's breath caught. I'm not that girl anymore. Maybe not, but you could be, if you wanted to. And what about you? What do you want? Landon reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. I want a second chance, he said. With you. With this. With everything I walked away from. That's a lot to want. I know. Elena closed her eyes. She could feel his hand still resting against her cheek, warm and solid. Could feel the weight of 16 years and all the choices that had led them here. She should pull away. Should tell him this was moving too fast, that they needed to focus on the case, that mixing business with whatever this was between them was a terrible idea. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch and let herself want something too. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Second chances. For both of us. Landon's smile was brilliant and heartbreaking all at once. And when he kissed her, soft and careful like she was something precious, Elena let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, some things were worth the risk of breaking for. The world didn't stop. The case didn't disappear. Cordell's threat still loomed on the horizon, but for one moment, standing in an empty cafe with rain starting to fall outside, Elena Brooks let herself feel something other than tired. She felt alive, and that, she thought, was a start. The kiss ended, but the weight of it stayed. Elena pulled back first, her heart hammering against her ribs. Landon's hand was still cupped against her cheek, his thumb tracing a line along her jaw that made thinking difficult. We should, she started. I know. This complicates things. Yeah. Neither of them moved. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming against the cafe windows in a rhythm that sounded almost angry. Elena could see their reflection in the glass. Two figures standing too close, the space between them charged with something that felt dangerous and inevitable all at once. I should go, she said, even though she didn't want to. Probably. Landon's hand dropped away, leaving cold air where his warmth had been. But Elena, don't. Whatever you're about to say, just, not tonight. Let me process this first. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe. Or understanding. With Landon, it was getting harder to tell the difference. Okay, he said quietly, but we're not done talking about this. I know. She gathered her things with shaking hands, hyper-aware of him watching her every movement. When she reached the door, she looked back. Landon stood in the center of the empty cafe, his expensive suit rumpled, his carefully maintained composure cracked just enough that she could see the boy underneath. Thank you, Elena said. For tonight, for all of it. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. She left before he could respond, stepping out into the rain without bothering to open her umbrella. The cold water felt good against her overheated skin, grounding her in something real and immediate. Her phone buzzed as she reached the subway entrance. Landon. Get home safe. Elena stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Elena. I will. Another buzz, almost immediately. Landon. We're going to figure this out, all of it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the legal battle and Cordell's threats and the impossible tangle of their past could somehow be sorted into something manageable. But wanting something didn't make it true. Elena pocketed her phone and descended into the station, leaving the rain and the cafe and the memory of Landon's kiss behind. The next morning arrived with the subtle violence of a hangover Elena hadn't earned. She'd barely slept, her mind running circles around everything David Chen had told them. Phase 2. 200 acres. Families who didn't know what was coming. Her coffee tasted like ash. She was supposed to have class at 9, but Elena found herself on the subway, heading downtown instead, toward Pierce Capital's offices. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't made an appointment. She just needed to see Landon, needed to ground herself in the reality of what they were facing before her imagination spiraled it into something worse. The receptionist recognized her this time. Ms. Brooks, Mr. Pierce is in a meeting, but I'll wait. She sat in the sleek lobby with its uncomfortable modern furniture and walls of glass, watching people in expensive suits hurry past with tablets and coffee cups. Everyone looked so purposeful, so certain of their place in the world. Elena had never felt more out of place. 40 minutes later, Landon emerged from the elevator with Patricia and two men Elena didn't recognize. He saw her immediately, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to something warmer. Elena, I didn't know you were coming. Sorry, I should have called. No, it's... He glanced at Patricia. Give me 5 minutes? You have the board meeting at 11, Patricia reminded him. I know, 5 minutes. They found an empty conference room and Landon closed the door behind them. The silence felt heavy after the ambient noise of the lobby. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know. I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about what David said, about the other families. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. What if we're too late? What if Cordell's already started acquiring their land? We're looking into it. Patricia has investigators checking property records, reaching out to landowners in the area. And if he has, then we stop him. Landon moved closer but didn't touch her, like he was unsure of the rules now. Elena, I meant what I said last night. We're going to handle this. You keep saying that, but Landon, this man has political connections, money, power. What do we have? The truth. That's not enough. It has to be. Elena laughed, a brittle sound. When has the truth ever been enough? My father told the truth about how sick he was, about how desperate he was, and they used it against him. Truth doesn't win against people like Cordell. Landon's jaw tightened. So what do you want to do? Give up? No, I want... She pressed her palms against her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her. I want to believe you. I want to believe this matters, that we can actually make a difference. But I'm scared. So am I. That made her look up. You're scared? Terrified. Cordell's not just going to roll over because we exposed him. He's going to fight back, and when he does, it's going to get ugly. Landon's voice dropped. And I'm scared that when it does, you're going to get hurt, that I'm going to be the reason you get hurt. Again. Elena saw the vulnerability in his eyes, raw and honest, and felt something in her chest loosen. Last night, she said quietly, when you kissed me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have... I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking what it meant. Landon was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes searching hers. It meant I'm done pretending this is just about the land. It meant that somewhere between finding you again and watching you fight for what's right, I remembered why I... He stopped, shook his head. It meant everything. Elena's breath caught. We can't do this, she said. Not in the middle of everything else. I know. It's too complicated, too messy. I know that too. So why does it feel like the only thing that makes sense? Landon smiled, sad and genuine. Because maybe it is. Before Elena could respond, Patricia knocked on the glass door. Landon, the board's waiting. He nodded without taking his eyes off Elena. I have to go, but stay, please. We're having a strategy meeting this afternoon about the case. I want you there. I don't know anything about corporate strategy. You know what Cordell did. That makes you more qualified than half the people in that room. He hesitated, then added, and I work better when you're here. Elena shouldn't stay. She had class, had a shift at the cafe, had 100 reasons to leave this glass tower and go back to her regular life. But she didn't. Okay, she said. I'll stay. The board meeting ran long. Elena waited in Landon's office, a space that somehow managed to be both imposing and impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the view so expansive it made her dizzy. His desk was neat to the point of obsessive. No clutter, no personal photos except one small frame turned away from the door. Elena picked it up. A little girl with dark curls and Landon's eyes grinned at the camera, missing her 2 front teeth. She wore a princess costume that was clearly homemade, the crown sitting crooked on her head. Sophie. That was Halloween last year. Elena turned to find Landon in the doorway, his tie loosened and exhaustion written across his face. She wanted to be a dragon princess, he continued, coming into the office. Couldn't decide between the two, so she combined them. Wore that costume for 3 weeks straight. She looks happy. She is, most of the time. Landon took the frame from Elena, studying his daughter's face with an expression so tender it made Elena's chest ache. Her therapist says she's doing well, considering her mom died. Yeah. Elena sat in one of the chairs facing his desk. What was she like? Your wife? Landon set the photo down carefully. Caroline was complicated, ambitious, brilliant, absolutely terrible at sitting still. We met in business school, got married too young, had Sophie even younger. He ran a hand through his hair. The divorce was my fault. I was building the company, working 80-hour weeks, never home. By the time I realized what I was losing, she'd already decided to leave. But you stayed in Sophie's life. Of course, she's my daughter. He looked at Elena. Caroline got sick 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast, diagnosed in March, gone by August. And suddenly I was a single father with a 3-year-old who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home. I'm sorry. Don't be. We made it work. Sophie and me. We figured it out together. His voice softened. She's the best thing I ever did. The only thing I'm absolutely sure I got right. Elena thought about her own father, about the last months watching him fade, and felt a kinship with this little girl she'd never met. I'd like to meet her, she said. Sometime. If you think it's appropriate. Landon's expression brightened. Really? Really. But Landon, if we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need to know Sophie comes first, always. She does. Even before me? Especially before you. He said it without hesitation, and Elena loved him a little bit for it, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for both. The word love had entered her thoughts so casually, it took a moment for Elena to register it. She pushed it away, not ready to examine what that meant. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. We have a problem. The conference room was packed when they arrived. Patricia pulled up a news article on the screen at the front of the room, and Elena's stomach dropped. The headline read, Pierce Capital under investigation for land fraud. It went live 20 minutes ago, Patricia said. Already picked up by 3 major outlets. Landon scanned the article, his face darkening with every paragraph. This is Cordell. Obviously, he's trying to control the narrative before we can. What does it say? Elena asked. Patricia's voice was clinical. It claims Pierce Capital knowingly acquired land through fraudulent means and is now attempting to cover it up by scapegoating a former executive. There are anonymous quotes from sources close to the company, saying the fraud goes all the way to the top. That's a lie. Of course it's a lie, but perception is reality in these situations. Patricia looked at Landon. The board is going to want a response, fast. Then we give them one. We release David's evidence, show exactly what Cordell was planning. That could open us up to additional legal liability. I don't care. Landon, I said I don't care. His voice cut through the room. Cordell is trying to bury this by making us look like the villains. We're not playing that game. We tell the truth, all of it, and let the pieces fall where they will. One of the board members, an older man with silver hair, leaned forward. And what about the stock price? This kind of scandal could tank us. Then it tanks. But we don't build this company on lies. Easy to say when it's not your money on the line. It is my money. It's my company. And I'm telling you, we do this right or we don't do it at all. The room erupted in arguments. Elena sat quietly, watching Landon hold his ground against people twice his age, his conviction unwavering. This was who he'd become, not just a billionaire, but someone willing to risk everything for what he believed was right. When the meeting finally ended 2 hours later, Landon looked ready to collapse. Come on, Elena said, taking his hand. You need a break. You need a break. She pulled him out of the office, past the assistants trying to flag him down, into the elevator before he could protest. They rode down in silence, Landon's hand still warm in hers. Outside, the city was in full swing, people rushing past, car horns blaring, the ambient chaos of Manhattan at midday. Elena led him to a small park 2 blocks away, a pocket of green that somehow survived among the concrete and glass. They sat on a bench near a fountain, watching pigeons fight over a discarded bagel. Thank you, Landon said finally. For what? For pulling me out of there before I said something I'd regret. You didn't say anything wrong. I called Morrison an idiot, to his face. He was being an idiot. Landon laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Fair point. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, Elena hyper-aware of his thigh pressed against hers, of the way his fingers were still laced through hers. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait. Patricia's drafting a statement. Our PR team is reaching out to journalists. By tonight, our side of the story will be out there. And Cordell? We'll escalate. This is just the opening move. Landon's hand tightened around hers. Elena, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Are you sure you want to be in the middle of this? I'm already in the middle of it. You could walk away. Take the settlement offer we discussed. Let me handle Cordell. Is that what you want? No, but I want you safe more than I want you here. Elena turned to face him fully. I'm not walking away. This is my fight too. It's going to cost you. Your privacy, your peace. Cordell will dig into everything. Your finances, your past, people you know. He'll try to find something to discredit you. Let him try. I have nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide. Not me. I've spent the last 8 years barely surviving. My credit's terrible. I work 2 jobs. I live in a shoebox with roommates I barely know. There's nothing impressive or scandalous about my life. I'm boring. Landon's expression softened. You're not boring. You're real. And that's exactly what scares me, that Cordell will try to make your reality look like a liability. Elena hadn't considered that. The idea that her poverty, her struggles, could be weaponized against her made her stomach turn. Then we deal with it, she said, sounding more confident than she felt. Together. Landon studied her face for a long moment, and Elena could see him weighing something, deciding. Come to dinner, he said finally. Tonight, at my place. Meet Sophie. Landon, I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but if we're doing this, if we're really in this together, then I want you to meet the most important person in my life, and I want her to meet you. Elena's heart was racing. This was a line, once crossed, that couldn't be uncrossed. Meeting Sophie meant this was real, meant she was committing to something beyond just helping with the case. What if she doesn't like me? Elena asked. She will? You can't know that. Yes, I can. Landon brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that made her breath catch. Because I know Sophie, and I know you, and you're going to get along perfectly. Elena wanted to say no, wanted to pump the brakes on whatever this was before it spiraled into something she couldn't control. But when she looked at Landon, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, she couldn't make herself refuse. Okay, she said. Dinner, tonight. The smile he gave her was bright enough to hurt. Landon's apartment was not what Elena expected. She'd braced herself for something ostentatious, marble floors, original art, the kind of wealth that announced itself in every detail. But when she stepped off the elevator directly into his penthouse, she found something different. It was elegant, yes, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a glittering toy, but it was also unmistakably lived in. A fortress of colorful cushions dominated one corner of the living room. Books were scattered across the coffee table, children's stories mixed with business journals. There was a drawing taped to the refrigerator of what Elena assumed was supposed to be a family. 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Sophie's work, Landon said, following her gaze. That's me, her, and Charlie, her goldfish. Not her mom. She has her own drawings of Caroline, keeps them in her room. He set down Elena's jacket. She's getting ready. Fair warning. She's very excited to meet you. I may have oversold how cool you are. Great, no pressure. A door opened down the hall, and a small whirlwind burst into the living room. Sophie Pierce was 6 years old and utterly fearless. She wore mismatched socks, leggings with stars on them, and a t-shirt that proclaimed future astronaut in bold letters. Her dark curls were pulled into 2 lopsided pigtails, and she had a smudge of what looked like marker on her cheek. She stopped short when she saw Elena, her green eyes, so much like her father's, going wide. Hi, Sophie said. Hi, Elena managed. You're the lady from the picture. Elena glanced at Landon, confused. I may have shown her your photo, he admitted, from the old newspaper article. You look different with pigtails, Sophie informed her seriously. I like pigtails, but Daddy says I can't sleep in them because I'll get bumps on my head. That's probably good advice. Sophie moved closer, studying Elena with the intense scrutiny only children could manage. Daddy says you're helping him with important work stuff. I'm trying to. Are you good at work stuff? Sometimes. I'm good at dinosaurs. Sophie said it like a challenge. That's very impressive. Do you like dinosaurs? Sure. What's your favorite? Elena's mind went blank. She knew maybe 3 dinosaur names, and 2 of them were probably from Jurassic Park. T-Rex? Sophie's face fell. That's everyone's favorite. It's boring. Okay, what's your favorite? The Rhizinosaurus. It has really long claws, but it's actually a herbivore, which means it doesn't eat meat even though it looks scary. Most people think scary things are mean, but sometimes they're just different. Elena felt something in her chest crack open. That's a good lesson. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer. Daddy, can Elena stay for dessert? We're having ice cream. We're having dinner first, Landon said, but he was smiling. I know, but I wanted to make sure she stays for the good part. I'll stay for the good part, Elena promised. Sophie grinned, revealing the gap where her front teeth used to be, and grabbed Elena's hand. Come on, I'll show you my room. I have 17 stuffed animals, and I know all their names. Elena let herself be dragged down the hallway, catching Landon's eye as she passed. He looked ridiculously pleased, like she'd just passed some crucial test. Maybe she had. Sophie's room was controlled chaos, toys everywhere, drawings covering the walls, a bookshelf crammed with more books than Elena had owned in her entire childhood. Sophie narrated everything, pointing out her favorite possessions with the seriousness of a museum curator. This is Mr. Whiskers. He's a cat, but he doesn't like fish, which is weird, because cats are supposed to like fish. And this is Dragon. I know it's not a creative name, but I got him when I was 3 and I didn't know better. And this... Sophie. Landon appeared in the doorway. Let Elena breathe. She's breathing. I can see her breathing. Dinner's ready. Already? You've been talking for 20 minutes. Sophie looked at Elena hopefully. Can we keep talking during dinner? Absolutely, Elena said. They ate at the dining table, pasta that Landon had clearly ordered from somewhere expensive but served on plates decorated with cartoon characters. Sophie maintained a running commentary about her day, her upcoming field trip, and the deeply important issue of whether her friend Madison was being fair about sharing the blue crayon. Elena found herself relaxing, laughing at Sophie's observations about the world. The little girl had her father's intensity, but none of his guardedness, approaching life with the kind of openness that came from being loved unconditionally. Elena's nice, Sophie announced around a mouthful of pasta. She can come back. Sophie, manners, Landon said. Sorry. Elena's nice and she can come back, please. That's not exactly what I... Never mind. He looked at Elena. What do you think? Want to come back? I think I'd like that. Sophie cheered, nearly knocking over her water glass. After dinner, true to her word, there was ice cream. Sophie insisted on making Elena a sundae with what appeared to be every topping in the kitchen. The result was structurally unsound and possibly inedible, but Elena ate it anyway while Sophie watched with satisfaction. When bedtime rolled around, Sophie hugged Elena goodnight with the easy affection of someone who'd already decided they were friends. Will you read me a story? She asked. Sophie, Elena doesn't have to. I'd love to, Elena said. They settled on Sophie's bed, a book about a brave mouse and a dangerous journey clutched in the little girl's hands. Elena read slowly, doing different voices for each character, while Sophie snuggled against her side and Landon watched from the doorway with an expression Elena couldn't quite name. By the last page, Sophie was fighting sleep, her eyes drooping. Elena, she mumbled. Yeah? I'm glad you're helping my daddy. He's been sad for a long time, but he smiles more now. Elena's throat tightened. I'm glad too. Will you come back? For real? For real. Promise? Elena looked over at Landon, at the hope and vulnerability written across his face, and made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Promise, she said. Sophie fell asleep with a smile on her face. Later, after Sophie was tucked in and the apartment had gone quiet, Elena and Landon stood in the kitchen, the city lights twinkling through the windows like stars that had fallen and couldn't find their way back up. Thank you, Landon said quietly, for tonight, for being so good with her. She made it easy. She likes you, really likes you. He moved closer. I told you she would. She's wonderful, Landon. You did good. We did good. Her mom and I, we might have failed at marriage, but we got Sophie right. Elena set down her wine glass. I need to tell you something. Okay? Meeting Sophie tonight, it changed things for me. Made this real in a way it wasn't before. She took a breath. I can't be casual about this. About us. Not if she's involved. I'm not asking you to be casual. What are you asking? Landon took her hands, his thumbs tracing circles on her wrists. I'm asking you to take a chance on me, on this, on the possibility that we could actually make it work. Landon, I know I hurt you, I know I left, and I know sorry doesn't fix that, but I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. Not again. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this time would be different, that the boy who'd vanished could become the man who stayed. But wanting something didn't make it safe. What if we crash and burn, she asked. What if we try this and it falls apart? And Sophie gets hurt because she got attached to me? Then we deal with it, together. Landon's grip tightened. Elena, I can't promise perfect. I can't promise easy. But I can promise I'm all in. Completely, terrifyingly all in. That's a lot of pressure. I know. What if I'm not ready? Then I'll wait. Elena looked at him, at this man who'd gone from childhood friend to stranger to something she didn't have words for yet, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. I don't want you to wait, she said. No? No, I want... She pulled him closer, closing the distance between them. I want this. Whatever it is. Even if it scares me. Landon's smile was soft and genuine. It scares me too. Good, then we're even. When he kissed her this time, it felt different. Not careful or tentative, but certain. Like a promise being made and accepted in the same breath. Elena lost herself in it, in the warmth of his hands on her waist, and the way he kissed like she was the only thing that mattered. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the constant anxiety that lived in her chest went quiet. They broke apart eventually, breathless and smiling. Stay, Landon said. Please, just for tonight. I'll take the couch. You can have my room. Landon. Or separate rooms, whatever you're comfortable with. I don't want you to leave yet. Elena knew she should go, should maintain some kind of boundary before this got even more complicated. But Sophie's voice echoed in her head. He's been sad for a long time, but he smiles more now. And Elena realized she didn't want to go either. Okay, she said. I'll stay. The relief on Landon's face was worth every risk. They talked until almost midnight, curled up on the couch with the city spread out below them. About nothing important and everything important. About Sophie's upcoming dance recital and Elena's exam schedule, and whether dinosaurs would have made good pets. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with both of them. Landon walked Elena to the guest room, lingering in the doorway like he wasn't quite ready to say goodnight. Thank you, he said, for tonight, for all of it. You keep thanking me, because I keep meaning it. Elena stood on her toes and kissed him, brief and sweet. Good night, Landon. Good night. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. This was happening. They were really doing this. And for the first time in 8 years, Elena let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, something good could last. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Maria. You better still be alive. Elena smiled and typed back. Elena. Alive. More than alive, actually. Maria. Oh boy. Details tomorrow? Elena. Details tomorrow. She set the phone aside and climbed into bed. The sheets soft and expensive and nothing like her apartment. But as she drifted off to sleep, it wasn't the luxury that made her feel safe. It was the knowledge that down the hall, Landon was doing the same thing. And in the room next to his, Sophie was dreaming her brave little dreams. For the first time in a very long time, Elena fell asleep smiling. And outside, the city kept moving, indifferent and eternal, holding their fragile new beginning in its glittering hands. Elena woke to the sound of small feet padding down the hallway and a whispered argument happening just outside her door. Daddy, I want to wake her up. Sophie, it's 6:30. Let her sleep. But what if she leaves before I can say goodbye? She's not going to leave without saying goodbye. How do you know? A pause, then Landon's voice, softer. Because she promised, and Elena keeps her promises. The certainty in his words made Elena's chest tight. She slipped out of bed and opened the door to find Sophie in pajamas covered with tiny rockets, bouncing on her toes, while Landon tried unsuccessfully to corral her toward the kitchen. You're awake! Sophie's face lit up. Did we wake you? Daddy said we had to be quiet, but I'm not very good at quiet. I noticed, Landon said dryly. It's okay. Elena crouched down to Sophie's level. I'm glad you woke me up. Do you want pancakes? Daddy makes really good pancakes. Sometimes he burns them, but mostly they're good. I don't burn them that often, Landon protested. Last Sunday you made 3 black ones. Those were supposed to be chocolate chip. They were black, Daddy. Elena laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd woken up laughing? They ate breakfast at the kitchen island, Sophie chattering about her upcoming show-and-tell presentation on the Rhizinosaurus, while Landon flipped pancakes with the focused intensity of someone determined not to burn them in front of an audience. The morning light streaming through the windows turned everything golden, and for a moment, Elena let herself pretend this was normal, that she belonged here, but reality reasserted itself when Landon's phone started buzzing incessantly on the counter. I need to take this, he said, glancing at the screen. His expression had shifted to something harder. Patricia. He stepped into his office, and Elena heard the low murmur of his voice through the door, too quiet to make out words, but loud enough to sense the tension. Is Daddy mad? Sophie asked, drowning her pancakes in syrup. I don't think so. Just busy with work. He's always busy with work. Sophie said it matter-of-factly, without resentment. But he says it's important, that he's helping people. He is helping people. Are you helping too? Elena thought about her father's land, about Cordell's schemes, about families who didn't know they were being targeted. I'm trying to. That's what Daddy always says. Sophie took a massive bite of pancake. I think trying is good enough. Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds. Landon emerged from his office 10 minutes later looking grim. What happened? Elena asked. He glanced at Sophie, then back at Elena. Can we talk? After I dropped Sophie at school? The drive to Sophie's school was a blur of morning traffic and Sophie's running commentary about everything they passed. Elena sat in the back seat with her, listening to elaborate theories about why pigeons walked funny and whether clouds were actually solid if you got close enough. When they pulled up to the school, a brick building with colorful murals covering one wall, Sophie hugged her father goodbye and then, without warning, threw her arms around Elena too. See you later? She asked hopefully. See you later, Elena promised, even though she had no idea if it was true. They watched Sophie skip through the entrance, her backpack nearly as big as she was. Then Landon pulled back into traffic. Patricia got a call this morning, he said without preamble, from the district attorney's office. Elena's stomach dropped. And? They're opening a criminal investigation into the land acquisitions. Not just your father's property, all of them. Every deal Cordell touched in the last 5 years. That's good, right? That's what we wanted. It is. But there's a catch. Landon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They want to interview you, officially, on the record. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prepare for questions she didn't know, about events she'd spent 8 years trying to forget. Okay, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Okay, what do I need to do? Patricia will prep you this afternoon, walk you through likely questions, how to answer, what not to say. He glanced at her. Elena, this is going to be hard. They're going to ask about your father, about his illness, about the financial situation. It's going to hurt. I know. You don't have to do this. We have enough evidence without your testimony. But it would help if I testified. Landon was quiet for a moment. Yes, it would help a lot. Putting a human face on what Cordell did, it makes it real in a way documents can't. Then I'll do it. Just like that? Elena looked out the window at the city rushing past. You said it yourself. We tell the truth, all of it, and let the pieces fall where they will. I'm not backing down now. Landon reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You're incredible. You know that? I'm terrified. You can be both. They spent the rest of the drive in silence, Elena's hand warm in Landon's, both of them bracing for what came next. The prep session with Patricia lasted 4 hours. They sat in a conference room at Pierce Capital, Patricia firing questions at Elena while a junior associate took notes. What did your father tell you about the sale? Did anyone pressure him? What was his mental state? Did he understand what he was signing? Elena answered as honestly as she could, but the questions felt like surgical instruments, each one precisely designed to cut open old wounds. They're going to ask about the medical bills, Patricia said, checking her notes. The prosecution will want to establish that your father was financially desperate, which supports the coercion angle. But the defense, if Cordell lawyers up, which he will, they're going to try to spin it as him making a rational business decision to pay for treatment. He was dying, Elena said flatly. There was nothing rational about it. He would have sold anything, signed anything, if it meant a few more months with me. I know, but they'll argue he was of sound mind, that the transaction was legal regardless of the circumstances. Patricia's expression softened. I need you to be ready for them to make your father look like he made bad choices. It's going to be ugly. Let them try. By the time the session ended, Elena's head was pounding and her throat was raw from talking. Landon had been in meetings all afternoon, so Patricia arranged for a car to take Elena home. She rode through the city in silence, watching people go about their normal lives, grabbing coffee, hailing cabs, arguing on cell phones. None of them knew that tomorrow morning, Elena would sit in a government office and relive the worst year of her life. Her phone buzzed. Maria. Haven't seen you in days. You still alive, or did the billionaire murder you? Despite everything, Elena smiled. Elena. Still alive, barely. Maria. Come by the cafe tonight. I'm closing. We can talk. Elena. I'll be there. The cafe was nearly empty when Elena arrived at 8. Maria was wiping down tables, humming along to the radio, playing something jazzy and melancholic. Look what the cat dragged in, Maria said, but her smile was warm. You look like hell. Thanks. You really know how to make a girl feel special. Seriously, though, you okay? Maria set down her rag and studied Elena's face. And don't give me that I'm fine bullshit. What's going on? Elena sank into the nearest chair. Tomorrow I have to testify to the district attorney about what happened with my dad's land. They're building a criminal case. Against the billionaire? Against his former executive, the one who orchestrated everything. But you're with the billionaire, right? I mean, you stayed over at his place. I'm assuming that means something. Elena's cheeks heated. How did you? You're wearing the same clothes you left in 2 days ago, and you have that look. What look? I finally got laid and it was good look. Maria, am I wrong? Elena buried her face in her hands. It wasn't like that. I stayed in the guest room. But you wanted it to be like that. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. Maria sat across from her, her expression turning serious. Elena, I've known you for 6 years. In that entire time, I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at him. So yeah, I'm asking, are you with him? For real? Was she? They'd kissed. She'd met his daughter. She'd slept in his apartment and woken up to family breakfast. But they hadn't defined anything, hadn't put labels on whatever this was. I don't know, Elena admitted. It's complicated. It's always complicated. That's not an answer. I like him. A lot. More than I should, probably, given everything that's happening. But Maria, Elena looked up. What if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm just caught up in the moment, and when this is all over, we realize we don't actually work? What if you do work? That scares me more. Maria reached across the table and took Elena's hand. You know what I think? I think you've spent so long protecting yourself that you've forgotten how to let anyone in. And now this guy shows up, this guy who knew you before life got hard, and he's offering you a chance at something real, and that's terrifying because real things can hurt you. Elena's throat tightened. What if he leaves again? What if he doesn't? They sat in silence for a moment, the question hanging between them. I testified once, Maria said quietly. In my divorce. Had to sit there and answer questions about why my marriage failed, what I did wrong, whether I tried hard enough to save it. And you know what the worst part was? Not the lawyers or the questions. It was realizing that I'd spent so long being afraid of failing that I'd forgotten how to try. How is this relevant? Because tomorrow, when you walk into that office, you're going to be scared, and that's okay. But don't let the fear stop you from doing what's right, and don't let it stop you from being with someone who makes you happy, either. Elena squeezed Maria's hand. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You're just finally listening. They talked until Maria had to lock up, about nothing and everything. Elena's upcoming exams, Maria's terrible Tinder dates, whether the cafe should start serving oat milk. Normal things, easy things. By the time Elena left, some of the weight on her chest had lifted. Her phone buzzed as she reached the subway. Landon, how are you doing? Elena, nervous, but okay. Landon, want me to come over, or you can come back here? Sophie's asking if you're coming for dinner. Elena smiled despite herself. Elena, tell Sophie I'll see her soon, but tonight I need to be alone. To think. Landon, I understand, but Elena, you're going to be great tomorrow. I know you are. Elena, how can you be so sure? Landon, because I know you. She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Elena, thank you for everything. Landon, always. The district attorney's office was in a building that looked like it had been designed specifically to intimidate people. Gray stone, narrow windows, security guards who looked like they'd enjoy strip searching someone. Elena arrived 15 minutes early with Patricia at her side. They were shown to a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and a recording device that looked aggressively official. Remember, Patricia said in a low voice, answer only what they ask. Don't volunteer extra information. If you need a break, say so. And if anything feels inappropriate, I'll step in. Elena nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. The door opened and 2 people entered. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense pantsuit, and a younger man carrying a thick file folder. Ms. Brooks, I'm Assistant District Attorney Chen. This is my colleague, Mr. Kowalski. Thank you for coming in. The irony of the name wasn't lost on Elena. A different Chen than the one who'd brought them evidence, but still, the universe had a twisted sense of humor. Let's begin, Chen said, settling into her chair and clicking on the recorder. For the record, this is an interview with Elena Brooks regarding the fraudulent acquisition of property located at... The next 2 hours were brutal. They asked about her father's diagnosis, his treatment, his declining mental state in those final months. They asked about the bills, the creditors calling at all hours, the way desperation had eaten away at him until there was almost nothing left. Elena answered as steadily as she could, but some questions hit harder than others. Did your father ever express regret about selling the land? Chen asked. Every day, Elena said. Her voice cracked. He'd say it was a mistake, that he should have fought harder, found another way. But by then it was too late. Did he understand the terms of the sale? They told him the land was worth $30,000. He believed them because he didn't have the energy to question it. He was dying. He just wanted to make sure I'd be okay after he was gone. And were you? Okay? Elena almost laughed. I was 19, broke and alone. I had to drop out of college, work 3 jobs just to survive. So no, I wasn't okay. Chen made a note. Can you describe the financial pressure your father was under at the time of the sale? This was it, the question Patricia had warned her about. Elena took a breath. We owed over $200,000 in medical bills. The insurance had capped out. We'd borrowed from everyone we could. Collection agencies were calling 5-6 times a day. My father... She stopped, steadied herself. My father sold that land because a man in a suit told him it was his only option, and he believed it because he was desperate and dying and he loved me. The room was very quiet. Thank you, Ms. Brooks, Chen said softly. I know this isn't easy. They asked more questions about the timeline, about who she'd spoken to, about whether anyone had ever offered to help them fight the sale. Elena answered mechanically, exhaustion pulling at her like an undertow. Finally, Chen clicked off the recorder. That's all we need for now. We'll be in touch if we have follow-up questions. Elena stood on shaking legs. Patricia guided her out of the building into the cold air and noise of the street. You did good, Patricia said. Elena couldn't respond. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything except the memory of her father's face in those final days. Patricia's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression hardened. When? How bad? A pause. We're on our way. She hung up and looked at Elena. That was Landon. There's been a development. What kind of development? The kind where we need to get back to the office. Now. The conference room was packed when they arrived. Landon stood at the head of the table, his face a mask of controlled fury. David Chen was there too, looking pale and shaken. What happened? Elena asked. Landon handed her a tablet. On the screen was a news article published 20 minutes ago. The headline read, "Whistleblower in Pierce Capital Case Admits to Fabricating Evidence." Elena's blood went cold. "What?" "It's a lie," David said quickly. "I didn't say any of that. I didn't even talk to this reporter." "Then where did this come from?" Patricia demanded. "Cordell." Landon's voice was ice. "He's trying to discredit David before the DA's case gets any traction. If David looks unreliable, everything he brought us gets called into question." "But we verified the documents," Elena said. "The emails, the recordings, they're real. Doesn't matter if the public thinks David made them up." Landon pulled up another article. "Look, this one quotes anonymous sources saying David was fired from Pierce Capital for falsifying reports. This one suggests he had a personal vendetta against Cordell." "This is character assassination," Patricia said. "This is war," Landon corrected. "And Cordell just fired the first real shot." Elena felt sick. "What do we do?" "We fight back. We release our own statement. We have David go on record refuting these claims." "That won't be enough," Patricia interrupted. "Once a narrative takes hold, it's almost impossible to change it. We need something bigger." The room fell silent, everyone thinking. Then Elena had an idea. A terrible, risky, potentially stupid idea. "What if we go public?" she said. "Not just with statements, with everything, the full story. My father, the land, what Cordell did. Make it personal. Make it real." "Elena, that would put a target on your back," Landon said immediately. "Cordell would come after you with everything he has." "He's already coming after us. At least this way, we control the narrative." "She's right," Patricia said slowly. "A human interest angle. Daughter fights to expose the truth about her father's stolen land. That's compelling. The media would eat it up." "It's also incredibly risky," Landon countered. "Elena, if you do this, you're going to lose your privacy. Reporters will dig into every aspect of your life. Cordell will try to destroy your credibility. Are you really ready for that?" Elena thought about her father, about the families Cordell was targeting, about Sophie asking if Elena was helping people. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." Landon looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "Okay," he said finally. "Then we do it. Together." The press conference was scheduled for the next morning. Elena barely slept, running through what she'd say, how she'd say it. Patricia had written talking points, but Elena knew she'd have to speak from the heart. This wasn't about legal strategy. This was about making people care. Landon picked her up at 6 a.m., Sophie in the back seat still in her pajamas. "Daddy said you're going to be on TV," Sophie said sleepily. "Are you nervous?" "Very nervous." "My teacher says being nervous means you care about something, so that's good." Elena smiled despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. "Your teacher sounds smart." They dropped Sophie at Landon's mother-in-law's house, a woman who greeted Elena with warm curiosity and a meaningful look at Landon that said they'd be talking later, and drove to the Pierce Capitol building. The press room was already filling with reporters. Elena counted at least 30 people, cameras and microphones at the ready. "Second thoughts?" Landon asked quietly. "About 100 of them. We can still cancel." "No, we can't." Patricia went over the plan one final time. Landon would speak first, providing context about the investigation and Pierce Capital's commitment to transparency. Then Elena would tell her story. Then they'd take questions. "Keep your answers brief," Patricia advised. "Don't let them bait you into saying something you'll regret." At exactly 9 a.m., they walked into the press room. The camera flashes were blinding. Elena took her seat next to Landon, her hands folded on the table to hide how badly they were shaking. Landon's opening statement was perfect, measured, professional, making it clear that Pierce Capital was cooperating fully with the investigation and had zero tolerance for the kind of fraud that had occurred. Then it was Elena's turn. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the cameras recording every word, and felt her throat close up. This was it, the moment where she either found her voice or lost it forever. She thought about her father, about standing by his hospital bed while he apologized for not leaving her more, about the years of struggling alone, convinced that nobody cared about her story. And she spoke. "My name is Elena Brooks. 8 years ago, my father sold 20 acres of land for $30,000 because he was dying and desperate. And a man in a suit told him it was worthless. That man lied. The land was worth millions, and he knew it. My father died thinking he'd made the best choice he could. He never knew he'd been robbed. The room was silent. I'm here because what happened to my father is still happening. Right now, there are families being targeted by people who see their desperation as an opportunity, and I'm done being quiet about it. Elena's voice strengthened. So yes, I'm cooperating with the investigation. And yes, I'm fighting to make sure Richard Cordell and everyone like him answer for what they've done. Because my father deserved better. And so does everyone else. She sat back, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Then the questions started. They came fast and aggressive, reporters shouting over each other, cameras zooming in, the noise overwhelming. Patricia fielded most of them, but one got through. Ms. Brooks, isn't it true that you're in a personal relationship with Mr. Pierce? How can we trust this isn't just about you trying to get money from him? The question landed like a slap. Elena opened her mouth, but Landon spoke first. My relationship with Ms. Brooks has nothing to do with this case. She's here because she's brave enough to tell the truth, even when it's hard. And frankly, the suggestion that she's doing this for money is insulting to her and to every family that's been victimized by this kind of fraud. His voice was steel. The reporter tried to follow up, but Patricia shut it down. We're done with questions. Thank you all for coming. They walked off stage to the sound of shouting reporters, but Elena barely heard them. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Outside the press room, Landon pulled her into an empty hallway. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know. Ask me in an hour when the adrenaline wears off. You were incredible. I was terrified. You can be both, remember? He smiled, and it was so full of pride that Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Thank you, she said, for having my back in there. Always. They stood there, close enough to touch, the sounds of the building muffled around them. Elena, Landon stopped, shook his head. Never mind. Not here. Not here what? Later, when this is all over. There's something I need to tell you. Before Elena could respond, Patricia appeared around the corner. We have a problem, she said. Cordell just released a statement. Of course he did. They regrouped in Landon's office, reading Cordell's response on his computer screen. It was masterful, expressing sympathy for Elena's loss while suggesting she was being manipulated, questioning the timing of the press conference, implying that Pierce Capital was using her as a pawn to save their reputation. He's good, Elena said bitterly. I'll give him that. It doesn't matter, Landon said. We told the truth. That's what matters. The truth doesn't always win, Landon. Then we make it win. His certainty would have been annoying if it wasn't so damn attractive. Elena's phone started buzzing. Then it didn't stop. Messages flooded in, from numbers she didn't recognize, from reporters, from people claiming to be victims of similar fraud. Her social media exploded with comments, some supportive, many vicious. Turn it off, Patricia advised. Don't read any of it. But Elena couldn't help herself. She scrolled through the comments, each one a tiny cut. Gold digger. Sob story. Sleeping her way to a settlement. Landon gently took the phone from her hands. Stop. They don't know you. They think they do. They're wrong. Elena wanted to believe him, but the comments kept echoing in her head, mixing with her own doubts until she couldn't tell which thoughts were hers and which were theirs. By the end of the day, she was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. Landon offered to drive her home, but Elena declined. She needed space, needed to think. Call me later? He asked. Yeah, later. She rode the subway home in a day, the other passengers' faces blurring together. When she finally reached her apartment, she locked the door, turned off her phone, and sat on her bed in the gathering darkness. She'd done the right thing. She knew she'd done the right thing, so why did it feel like she'd just made everything worse? 3 days passed in a blur of silence. Elena turned her phone back on once, just long enough to see the flood of messages, the news articles dissecting every word she'd said, the social media posts picking apart her clothes, her background, her relationship with Landon. Someone had found her high school yearbook photo and posted it with the caption, "Before she hit the jackpot." Another thread speculated about her motives, her character, whether she'd seduced Landon or if he was using her. She turned the phone off again. Maria showed up on the second day with Thai food and wine, sitting on Elena's bed, while Elena stared at the ceiling. You need to talk to him, Maria said. I know. He's called the cafe 6 times looking for you. I know. So why aren't you calling him back? Elena closed her eyes. Because what if they're right? What if I am just some desperate girl who latched onto the first rich guy who showed her attention? You know that's bullshit, do I? Maria, a month ago I was barely making rent. Now I'm testifying to district attorneys and doing press conferences and sleeping in penthouses. Doesn't that seem, I don't know, convenient? It seems like your life is changing. That's not the same thing as being a gold digger. Tell that to the internet. Maria set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Okay, real talk time. You're scared. You're scared because this thing with Landon is real. And that means it can hurt you. You're scared because for the first time in 8 years, you're not just surviving. You're actually living. And that's terrifying because you've gotten really good at survival. Elena felt tears burn behind her eyelids. What if I mess it up? What if you don't? It was the same question Maria had asked before, but this time it landed differently. What if she didn't mess it up? What if she let herself have this? Landon, Sophie, a future that looked nothing like the past she'd been drowning in. What if she was brave enough to try? On the 4th day, Elena finally turned her phone back on and called Landon. He answered on the first ring. Elena. Just her name, but the relief in his voice was palpable. I'm sorry, she said, for disappearing, for not calling. Are you okay? I don't know, but I'm trying to be. Where are you? Home. My apartment. Can I come over, please? Elena looked around her cramped studio, at the hand-me-down furniture and the water stain on the ceiling and the general shabbiness that was her life. The idea of Landon seeing it, really seeing it, made her want to crawl under the covers. But she was done hiding. Yeah, she said, come over. He arrived 40 minutes later, slightly out of breath like he'd run part of the way. His hair was messed up, his shirt wrinkled, so unlike his usual polished appearance that Elena almost smiled. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood in her doorway, the awkwardness thick between them. Can I? Landon gestured inside. Right. Yes. Sorry. Elena stepped back, letting him in. He looked around her apartment with the kind of careful neutrality that made it clear he was trying very hard not to react. Elena saw it through his eyes. The twin bed shoved against one wall, the hot plate that passed for a kitchen, the single window that looked out onto a brick wall. It's not much, she said defensively. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. Landon turned to face her. Elena, I don't care about your apartment. I care about you. And I've been losing my mind for 3 days because you disappeared and I didn't know if you were okay. I needed space. I know, and I respect that. But space and ghosting are different things. He was right. She knew he was right. I'm sorry, Elena said again. The press conference, it was a lot. All those comments, all those people judging me, judging us. I started questioning everything. Questioning us? Questioning whether I'm doing this for the right reasons, whether I'm... She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Whether you're what? Whether I'm just using you like they're saying... Landon's expression shifted to something fierce. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Is it? Landon, look at my life, look at this place, and then look at yours. We're from completely different worlds. We're from the same world, he corrected. We grew up in the same town, played in the same creek, shared the same dreams. The fact that our lives went in different directions doesn't change that. But it does change everything else. You have money, power, connections. I have... Elena gestured around the apartment. You have integrity, courage, the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's terrifying. Elena, you think I care about the size of your apartment? I spent the first 15 years of my life in a place that made this look like a palace. I know what it's like to have nothing. And I know that having money doesn't make you a better person. It just makes you a person with money. Elena sank onto her bed, exhaustion crashing over her. I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone like you. Landon sat beside her, close but not touching. Someone like me? Someone successful, someone who has their life together, someone who... She broke off, frustrated. Someone who doesn't need me. Who says I don't need you? Landon, be serious. You're a billionaire. You have everything. I have money, he said quietly. That's not the same thing as everything. Elena, do you know what my life was like before you walked back into it? Meetings and decisions and making sure Sophie was okay while trying not to think too hard about how lonely I was. And then one morning, I walked into a cafe and there you were. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Elena's throat tightened. You can't put that on me. That's too much pressure. I'm not putting it on you. I'm just telling you the truth. He finally reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. You asked what I need. I need someone who sees me as more than a bank account. Someone who knew me before the money and still liked me anyway. Someone who challenges me to be better. He looked at her. I need you. The words hung between them, simple and devastating. What if I let you down? Elena whispered. What if you don't? There it was again. That question that kept haunting her. Elena looked at their joined hands, at the way his fingers fit perfectly between hers, and made a decision. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, I'm in. Completely, terrifyingly in. She met his eyes. But Landon, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to change who I am. I'm not going to suddenly fit into your world like I belong there. I'm going to make mistakes, say the wrong things, probably embarrass you at fancy events. I don't go to fancy events if I can help it. You know what I mean. I do. And Elena, I don't want you to change. I want you exactly as you are, stubborn, brave, completely unwilling to take anyone's bullshit, including mine. Despite everything, Elena smiled. I am pretty good at calling you out. You're excellent at it. Landon reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Can I kiss you now? Because I've been thinking about it for 4 days and it's driving me crazy. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm out of practice. Kiss me anyway. He did. And this time, there was no hesitation, no holding back. Just the two of them, finally on the same page, finally willing to take the risk. When they broke apart, Elena was breathless and smiling. So what now? She asked. Now we fight, together, and when it's over... Landon paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. When it's over, we figure out what comes next. One crisis at a time? Exactly. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, and for the first time in days, the anxiety in her chest loosened. They could do this. Maybe. The call from Patricia came 2 days later. Elena was in class, microeconomics, a subject that made her head hurt on a good day, when her phone vibrated with a text. Patricia, need you and Landon at the office? Now. Bring a bag. You might be gone a while. Elena's stomach dropped. She gathered her things and left, ignoring the professor's disapproving look. Landon was already at the office when she arrived, pacing in the conference room with an energy that suggested he'd been waiting for her. What's going on? Elena asked. Cordell's lawyers reached out, Patricia said without preamble. They want to negotiate a settlement. Elena blinked. A settlement? As in Cordell wants to make this go away before the criminal charges stick. Patricia pulled up a document on her tablet. They're offering full restitution for your father's land. $15 million, plus another $5 million for the other families he defrauded. In exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges. The number was so big it didn't feel real. $20 million, Elena repeated numbly. It's a good offer, Patricia said. Probably the best we're going to get. But the criminal charges, if we take the settlement, Cordell walks away? Not exactly. The DA can still pursue charges independently, but without your cooperation, the case gets a lot harder to prove. Elena looked at Landon. What do you think? I think it's your decision, he said carefully. This was never about the money for me. It was about making sure Cordell couldn't hurt anyone else. But Elena, that's $20 million. That's your future, your education, everything you've been working toward. It's also letting him off the hook. Maybe. Or maybe it's taking his resources away so he can't do this again. Landon moved closer. There's no wrong answer here. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Elena walked to the window, staring out at the city below. $20 million. She could pay off her father's remaining debts, go back to school full-time, never have to work a double shift at the cafe again. She could breathe, but Cordell would still be out there, Still connected, still powerful, still looking for the next desperate family to exploit. What about the other families? Elena asked. The ones in phase 2 of his plan. If we take the settlement, what happens to them? Patricia checked her notes. The settlement includes provisions to notify them about the mineral deposits on their land, gives them the option to renegotiate or cancel pending sales. But it doesn't guarantee they'll be protected. No, nothing can guarantee that. Elena closed her eyes, her father's voice echoing in her memory. Do the right thing, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She opened her eyes and turned back to Patricia and Landon. No settlement, she said. Patricia's eyebrows rose. Elena, I need you to think about this carefully. I have, and my answer is no. I want the criminal charges to move forward. I want Cordell in court, under oath, answering for what he did, not just to my father, but to everyone. The trial could take months, maybe years, and there's no guarantee you'll win. I know, but at least I'll know I tried. Elena looked at Landon. You said we tell the truth and let the pieces fall. I'm ready to do that. All the way. Landon's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then he smiled, small and genuine and so proud it made Elena's chest ache. Okay, he said. Then that's what we do. Patricia sighed. You're both insane, but fine. I'll let Cordell's team know we're declining the offer. And Patricia, Landon added, freeze the Millfield drilling project permanently. I want that land returned to Elena with no strings attached. Whatever mineral rights exist, they're hers to decide what to do with. Landon, that's non-negotiable. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Elena stared at him. You can't just give me $15 million worth of land. I'm not giving you anything. I'm returning what was stolen from your family. There's a difference. The board will never approve it. The board works for me, and if they have a problem with it, they can fire me. Landon's voice was steel. But I'm done building my company on other people's suffering. Patricia looked between them, then shook her head. You two deserve each other. Fine. I'll draw up the paperwork. After she left, Elena and Landon stood in the conference room alone. You didn't have to do that, Elena said. Yes, I did. Landon. Elena, stop, please. Let me do this one thing right. He took her hands, his grip firm. I can't change the past. I can't bring your father back or give you the last 8 years. But I can make sure his land, your land, is yours again. Let me do that. Elena's vision blurred with tears. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just... He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. Just stay. Keep fighting. Keep calling me on my bullshit. Keep being exactly who you are. I can do that. Good. They stood there wrapped in each other while the city hummed outside and the future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but theirs. The trial began 6 months later. In the interim, Elena's life had shifted in ways she was still trying to process. She'd moved out of her shoebox apartment into a modest one-bedroom closer to campus. Not fancy, but clean and quiet and hers. She'd reduced her hours at the cafe to part-time, using the settlement money Landon had insisted on giving her as an advance against the land return to finally focus on school. And she'd become a fixture in Landon's life, and he in hers. Some days she still woke up convinced it was all temporary, that any moment the universe would correct itself and send her back to struggling alone. But then Sophie would video call to show her a drawing, or Landon would text her something ridiculous in the middle of a board meeting, and Elena would remember that this was real. Messy and complicated and absolutely real. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and wood paneling and the weight of justice that may or may not be served. Elena sat in the front row with Landon on one side and Patricia on the other, watching as Cordell entered with his legal team. He looked smaller than she remembered, older, but his eyes were still cold when they swept past her. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Elena testified again, this time on the stand, with Cordell's lawyers trying to tear apart her story. They questioned her memory, her motives, her relationship with Landon. They suggested she was bitter about her father's death and looking for someone to blame. But Elena held steady. She told the truth, all of it, the painful parts and the desperate parts, and the parts that made her want to stop talking and never speak again. And when Cordell's lawyer suggested that her father had made a business decision, Elena looked directly at Cordell and said, My father made a decision to trust someone, and you used that trust to rob him. There's nothing businesslike about that. That's just cruelty. The courtroom was silent. Other witnesses testified. David Chen, who laid out the paper trail of Cordell's fraud in excruciating detail. Families from the Phase 2 plans who'd been contacted just in time. Forensic accountants who showed exactly how much Cordell had profited from the scheme. By the end, even Cordell's lawyers looked uncomfortable. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Elena spent those days in a state of suspended animation, too anxious to eat, too wired to sleep. Landon stayed close, not hovering but present, a steady reminder that whatever happened, she wasn't alone. Sophie had made her a card that said, "You're the bravest person I know," with a drawing of Elena fighting a dragon. Elena kept it in her pocket, touching it like a talisman whenever the waiting got too hard. When the verdict finally came, Elena's hands were shaking so badly, Landon had to help her stand. They filed back into the courtroom. The jury looked tired but resolute. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." Elena held her breath. "On the count of fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty." The word guilty seemed to echo through the room. "On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of theft by deception, we find the defendant guilty." 3 counts. 3 guilty verdicts. Elena felt Landon's arm around her shoulders, holding her upright as relief and vindication and grief crashed over her in waves. Cordell's face was blank, but his hands were clenched on the table. The judge set a sentencing date and dismissed the court. As people filed out, Elena stayed seated, trying to process what had just happened. They'd won. Against the odds, against Cordell's money and connections and expensive lawyers, they'd actually won. "Elena?" Landon's voice was gentle. "You okay?" "I don't know. Ask me tomorrow." He smiled. "Fair enough." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. This time, Elena was ready. She stood on the steps with Landon beside her and gave a brief statement. "Today justice was served. Not just for my father, but for every family that Richard Cordell targeted. I hope this verdict sends a message that no amount of money or power puts you above the law. And I hope it gives other people the courage to come forward when they've been wronged." The questions came fast, but Patricia fielded them with practiced efficiency. When they finally made it to the car, Elena collapsed against the seat, exhausted. "That was intense," Landon supplied. "I was going to say surreal, but intense works too." Sophie was waiting at Landon's apartment with her grandmother, practically bouncing with excitement. "Did you win?" she demanded as soon as they walked in. "Grandma wouldn't tell me because she said I needed to hear it from you." "We won," Elena confirmed. Sophie threw her arms around Elena's waist. "I knew you would. I told everyone at school my friend Elena was going to beat the bad guy." "Your friend Elena had a lot of help, but you were the bravest." Sophie pulled back to look at her seriously. "Daddy said being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. That's you." Elena's throat tightened. She looked at Landon over Sophie's head and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. After Sophie went to bed, Elena and Landon sat on his balcony, the city lights spread below them like fallen stars. "What happens now?" Elena asked. It seemed to be her favorite question. "Now Cordell gets sentenced, probably 5 to 10 years, if Patricia's guess is right. The families get their restitution, and your father's land officially becomes yours again. And then? And then you decide what to do with it." Elena had been thinking about this for months. "I want to do something good, something that helps people." "Like what?" "I don't know yet. Maybe a community center, or affordable housing. Something that makes Millfield better instead of just making someone rich." Landon smiled. "I think that's perfect. And I'd like to help, if you'll let me." "Help how?" "However you need. Funding, resources, connections. Pierce Capital could partner with you, create a foundation focused on protecting vulnerable families from predatory land grabs. Make sure what happened to your father never happens to anyone else." Elena turned to face him fully. "You'd do that?" "I'd be honored to do that." Landon reached for her hand. "Elena, these last few months with you, they've reminded me why I got into business in the first place. Not to make money, but to make a difference. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way. You helped me find it again." I didn't do anything. You did everything. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You reminded me what matters, and I love you for it. The words hung in the air between them. Elena's breath caught. What? I love you, Landon said again, more firmly this time. I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you. And I know it's fast, and I know we still have things to figure out, but I needed you to know, because life's too short to not say the things that matter. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Landon, you don't have to say it back. Not until you're ready. I love you too, Elena interrupted. I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to admit it. Landon's smile was brilliant. Yeah? Yeah, completely, terrifyingly in love with you and your daughter and this weird new life we're building together. He pulled her close, kissing her until they were both breathless and laughing. So what now? Elena asked when they broke apart. Now we keep going, keep building, keep fighting for what matters. Landon tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Together. Together, Elena agreed, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the future didn't look terrifying. It looked possible. The sentencing happened 6 weeks later. Cordell got 8 years with the possibility of parole after 5. It wasn't enough. Could never be enough for what he'd done. But it was something. Elena didn't attend. She'd said everything she needed to say in court. Instead, she spent the day in Millfield with Landon and Sophie, walking the land that was hers again. The drilling equipment had been removed, the ground slowly healing. Spring was creeping in, turning everything green and new. This is where we used to play, Elena said, stopping by the creek. Your dad and I, we'd spend entire days out here. Sophie crouched down, peering into the water. Did you catch fish? Tried to. Never succeeded. Maybe they were too smart for you. Definitely too smart for me. Landon stood beside Elena, looking out over the land. It's beautiful. I can see why your family loved it. They did, my grandfather especially. He always said land has memory. It remembers who loved it and who used it. Elena smiled. I think he'd like what we're planning to do with it. The community center broke ground 3 months later. It would take time, years probably, but the vision was clear. A place for families who were struggling, who needed support, who deserved better than what people like Cordell offered. Elena enrolled full-time at school, finally pursuing the business degree she'd abandoned years ago. Between classes and the cafe shifts she'd kept because she liked the work more than she'd expected, she helped plan the center with Landon. They were good together, she realized. He had the resources and connections, she had the ground-level understanding of what people actually needed. Neither of them pretended to have all the answers, but they were figuring it out. Sophie appointed herself project mascot, creating elaborate drawings of what the center should look like, mostly involving slides and a dedicated dinosaur room, but the enthusiasm was appreciated. And slowly, piece by piece, Elena's life stopped feeling like survival and started feeling like living. She still had bad days, days when the comments from the trial resurfaced in her mind, when she questioned whether she deserved any of this, when the old fear of losing everything crept back in. But then Landon would make her laugh, or Sophie would demand Elena's opinion on something vitally important, like which color crayon was objectively the best, and Elena would remember that she wasn't alone anymore. 1 year after the trial, Elena stood in front of the completed community center with Landon on one side and Sophie on the other. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small, just local families, some reporters, and Patricia, who'd flown in for the occasion. Mayor of Millfield handed Elena the scissors. Would you like to say a few words? Elena looked out at the gathered crowd, at the building that bore her father's name on a plaque by the door. The James Brooks Community Center, in memory of a father who deserved better. My father taught me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they give, she said. He gave me everything he could, even when he had almost nothing left. This center is for people like him, people who are doing their best in impossible situations and deserve support, not exploitation. I hope it helps. And I hope my dad would be proud. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't try to hide it. Landon squeezed her hand. Sophie whispered, He would be. I know he would be. Elena cut the ribbon, and the crowd applauded as people streamed inside to explore the space. The resource center, the meeting rooms, the childcare area where parents could leave their kids while they met with financial advisors or legal aid. It wasn't much. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. That night, back at Landon's apartment, which had slowly become their apartment, Elena's things mingling with his and Sophie's in a way that felt natural. They celebrated with takeout pizza and ice cream. Sophie fell asleep on the couch halfway through a movie, and Landon carried her to bed with the practiced ease of single fatherhood. When he returned, Elena was standing by the window, looking out at the city. "Penny for your thoughts?" Landon said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Just thinking about how different everything is now. A year ago, I was barely surviving, and now—" She leaned back against him. "Now I have this. Us. The center. A future that actually looks like something." "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." Elena turned in his arms. "Well, maybe one." "What's that?" "That we lost so much time, 16 years of not knowing each other, of living separate lives." Landon was quiet for a moment. "You want to know what I think? I think we needed those 16 years. I needed to grow up, to learn who I was outside of where I came from. You needed to become the person strong enough to fight back when things got hard. If we'd stayed together back then, two kids from Millfield with nothing but each other, I don't know if we would have made it. You think we were better off apart?" "I think we were apart so we could find our way back together as the people we needed to be." He cupped her face in his hands. "And now that we're here, I'm not letting you go again." Elena smiled. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." Landon kissed her, soft and sweet, and Elena thought about promises, about the ones that got broken and the ones that held, about second chances and how rare they were, how precious. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Maria. Maria. Saw the news about the center. Your dad would be so proud. I'm proud. Don't let that billionaire of yours forget you have a shift tomorrow at 2. Elena laughed and showed the message to Landon. "You're still working at the cafe?" he asked. "2 shifts a week. I like it. Keeps me grounded. Plus you get free coffee. Plus I get free coffee." "Fair point." They stood there in comfortable silence, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. "Elena?" Landon said after a while. "Yeah?" "Move in with me. Officially. You're here most nights anyway, and Sophie keeps asking why you have 2 homes when one of them could have more room for her stuffed animals." Elena pulled back to look at him. "That's your big romantic pitch? More storage space for Sophie's stuffed animals? I'm still working on my romantic speeches. Give me time." He smiled. "But seriously, move in. Not because it makes sense logistically, but because I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want Sophie to have you in her life every day, not just sometimes. I want us to be a family, for real." Family. The word settled into Elena's chest, warm and terrifying and right. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Okay, I'll move in. We'll be a family, all of it." Landon's smile was bright enough to rival the city lights. "You're sure?" "Completely sure, terrifyingly sure. All the kinds of sure." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Elena lost herself in it, in him, in the impossible, improbable future they were building together. When they broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Elena had one more question. "What about the land?" "My father's land. Once the center is finished, there's still 15 acres left. What should I do with it?" Landon considered. "What do you want to do with it?" "I think—" Elena paused, the idea taking shape. "I think I want to keep it, not develop it, not sell it, just keep it wild. Let it be what it was when my dad and grandfather loved it, a place where kids can play and explore and believe the world is good. I think that's perfect." "You don't think it's a waste? All that money just sitting there?" "Elena, not everything has to be profitable to have value. Sometimes the best thing you can do with land is just let it be." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Besides, Sophie's going to need somewhere to look for dinosaur bones when she's older." "She's going to be a paleontologist?" "This week she is. Last week she wanted to be an astronaut. Next week, who knows?" Elena laughed. "She's got options. Just like her almost stepmom." The words hung in the air. Are you? Elena's heart was suddenly racing. "Not right now," Landon said quickly. "I'm not proposing, not yet. But someday, When the dust settles and we've had more than a year to figure this out, Elena Brooks, I'm going to ask you to marry me. And I really hope you'll say yes. Elena's eyes filled with tears. That's the worst non-proposal I've ever heard. I know. I'm terrible at this. Ask me anyway. What? Ask me anyway. Not for real. Just practice. So you can see what I'd say. Landon laughed, shaking his head. You're impossible. Ask me. He took both her hands in his expression turning serious. Elena Brooks, someday, when the time is right, will you marry me? Elena pretended to consider, drawing it out until Landon looked genuinely nervous. Yes, she said finally. Someday, when the time is right, I will absolutely marry you. Yeah? Yeah, but Landon, no fancy proposal. No helicopters or skywriting or whatever rich people do. Just you and me and Sophie, somewhere that matters. I can do that. Good. They sealed the non-proposal with a kiss that turned into several kisses, which turned into moving to the couch where they could be more comfortable. And later, when Elena finally drifted off to sleep with Landon's arms around her, and the soft sound of Sophie's breathing from down the hall, she thought about how strange life was. How a single cup of coffee could change everything. How the boy who'd disappeared could become the man who stayed. How loss and grief and years of struggling alone could somehow transform into this. Love and family and a future worth fighting for. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. There would be hard days ahead, arguments and setbacks, and moments when Elena would wonder if she was enough for this life. But she'd learned something in the past year. She'd learned that perfection wasn't the point. The point was showing up, trying, fighting for what mattered even when it was terrifying. And she'd learned that sometimes, if you were very lucky, the universe gave you a second chance. Not to fix the past, that was impossible, but to build something new from the wreckage. Something honest and imperfect and real. Something worth keeping. Outside, the city hummed its endless song, and inside, 3 people who'd found each other against all odds slept peacefully, wrapped in the fragile, precious knowledge that they were home. Not because of where they were, but because of who they were together. A shy waitress who'd found her voice, a billionaire who'd remembered his heart, and a little girl who believed in dragons and bravery and the possibility that broken things could be made whole again. They were a family now, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect in their imperfection. And that, Elena thought as she drifted deeper into sleep, was more than enough. It was everything.